Very tactfully.
very tactfully. She kind of slid it in. We're going to call the meeting to order, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't get to review the minutes. Is there any? I didn't even look.
Minutes from the November 6th
Did-
meeting.
Did Deb review?
Deb reviewed, I reviewed.
Okay. So we need a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. 242-1428, certificate of compliance.
Commission will recall requesting a stamped letter and from the project engineer certifying compliance, substantial compliance with the approved plan and the order of conditions that has been provided. And that was the last item of information that you had requested. So recommend issuing a certificate of compliance with the applicable ongoing conditions.
Joe?
I read it. That's what we were looking for.
Hal?
I'm all set with this letter.
Jack?
Good.
Sean?
No questions.
Motion?
I move that we issue the certificate of compliance for 242-1428.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.
Comes with
It's
it.
automatic,
with it.
it's automatic with the
Automatic,
COC.
Rides come with you, with your Big Mac.
Just not tonight.
Yeah, I don't have any spare,
Usually
I don't have any
takes 6
spare
weeks.
change. I don't have any spare change, so I can't give it to you tonight.
So we will be able to process that paperwork after the certificate of compliance is recorded and we get the book and page.
Okay. Thank you. Next one is 242-1759, 338 Blue Ridge Road.
Commission will recall issuing an order of condition that govern the construction of an in-ground pool and hot tub, associated infiltration trench, fire pit, associated block paver patio, replacement of an existing patio and paver block with paver blocks, a pool house, associated retaining wall with minimal grading on the wetland side, driveway extension and repaving of the existing driveway, installation of a shed and associated retaining wall for that as well. The work is currently underway and is in compliance with the order of conditions. This modification seeks approval for clearing up to the 25-foot no disturbance zone, relocation of the chain link fence, patio extension, and deck reconfiguration. I have consulted with the building inspector for setbacks relative to patios, and there aren't any. Right. And so that's what I have. The applicant and her consultant are here this evening. If you would like to ask questions or...
So I just passed out the clear acetate, that's of what the commission approved on the plan. So you can overlay the two and just get an idea of what the differences are and what we're presenting to the commission this evening. So you can line it up either with the house or the wetland flags and take a look at what we're proposing to change. Yeah.
A lot of these changes look like things we discussed at the meeting that just weren't solidified yet.
Right.
You went back and
yes.
rethought it, and
We hired a landscape architect to
Yeah.
help figure it out.
so,
And there was one minor thing, like the first land survey guy we had kind of cut the yard off in a corner. He came at an angle, so we just straightened it to follow the current line.
Mhm.
And then there was just a little misunderstanding on a small part.
so from what I'm seeing is that the patio has grown a little further to the east.
Correct.
to the,
Yes.
Back left of your yard,
And they pushed,
but no closer to the wetland.
no.
Correct.
And then in other areas, like the walkway and stuff that we were kind of concerned about, and that area at the parking area at the end, the gravel parking area,
Right.
that hasn't changed at all.
No.
Correct.
And you modified the deck design, instead of having it in
Yeah,
a
instead
corner,
of
you wrapped it
wrapping it so
around?
it's not as tight walking through, yes.
Right, the original proposal was to rebuild it in kind with what is existing, so.
So the footprint's not going out, but it's instead of having that little walkway on the side, it's just on the side of the sunroom.
My first thought, Maureen, is you were killing trees by giving us yet another handout at the last minute. But this overlay is awesome.
I know, I like that.
It's the
I'm all
best way
set.
to see it.
I'm all set.
I am all set also. I have no questions.
Where's the additional clearing?
So the additional clearing is, we're proposing to clear up to the 25-foot.
Yep.
In the original proposal, I think we were at 35 feet. So we just want to,
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha, no, I see. Okay, I don't have,
Yeah,
Right.
That was a concern we
thought we Right.
had, yeah.
right.
all right, I don't have any other questions.
The only question I had, and Amy answered it for me, was side setback.
Okay.
I thought it was 15 feet, and I think you had it at 12. So, now, do you have to go to building for amended building permit, or is it, you're fine?
I don't.
I don't know. It's a good question.
I can definitely share this plan with them and see what they have to say.
Okay, and if we do, we'll go to building. so.
Yeah, they were there today too, and we'll go through stuff, so I
Um,
could have, I'll ask. And they'll be there on Monday, so I can ask them too.
'Cause that's the only question I have. I don't have a problem with the project, except us approving the pool where they want to put it, that if they're in violation of zoning for setback, beside
Oh,
setbacks.
no, that's
And she
good.
said no.
Right.
Amy says no.
Clearly not, and the question was whether the patio was, and the patios have no setback as well.
Right, yeah. And I know when we went for the building permit, they said this part was all you guys, and they were more concerned about the deck and forward, so.
Well, that is part of the deck, around the pool, right?
The edge, yeah.
The house.
Edge,
The
edge
house.
of water, edge
Yeah.
of water for pool.
And they did the framing inspection today, and they went through
For the
it with the contractors.
Okay. So where the fire pit is, that's fire pit, right?
Yeah,
That's not, there's not gonna be any tile or anything?
no, it will, it is, it has coping, and it's like a built-in one into the
Right.
patio.
It has,
And, yeah, and it was there originally, the landscape guy thought it was too close to the house, so he said we should shift it
okay,
further back. But
Okay.
it's all like wall, stone, I don't know. There's,
I see that you gotta move that fire pit is definitely close, it's too close to the house, the one on this one.
yeah.
And the other question is, normally, I ask for a construction access and a stockpile area.
Yep, and
And is it here?
that's on the, side of the driveway.
Yep.
I guess, is that what this is?
Is it?
Yes.
Pardon
Yeah,
my- I
so
can't
I
see.
can show you on the plan.
Is it on the plan?
Yes. The plan's very busy, but this is the stockpile area.
Okay.
beside the driveway.
It just isn't, it's,
Proposed temporary soil stockpile.
okay, there, way up there. Okay. And construction access is gonna be,
Driveway.
They come through the driveway.
Okay.
It's happening now.
in the future, Maureen, just designate both,
Sure,
so that,
okay.
so it's easy, like, even as silly as I may be silly, but put stockpile area on the plan, so instead of us trying to, that is tough to read.
Will do.
It was, yeah. It's more legible on the original plan.
Okay. All right, I'm all set.
Just a quick follow-up, so when this originally went through, did we have a barrier there or just the conservation posts?
Just posts, which
Just-
are in.
Which are in? And now
And-
it's going up to the wetland instead of 10 feet away from it? Is that
Now
right?
it's right up against the 25, where the posts are now.
And that was surveyed in, I just.
It
found
was,
out.
okay. So the conservation posts you see on the modified plan have been surveyed. So that's where they are now.
I know where Sean's heading. In that, we've moved close to the wetlands clearing line. So we normally would require a permanent barrier. Now, before we didn't have to because you were at 50. Now you're at 25.
Well, we do have a fence around the 25-foot because it's an in-ground pool, so we need a fence, so it is,
But you're not putting it at the 25, you're putting it at the 50.
no, the fence will be at the
Well, there's
25.
Yeah, there's the wall.
Fence is at the 25.
The fence is at 20,
This is an iron fence.
yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong.
It's a chain link in the back.
Okay, I'm looking at two things. Oh yeah, it is at the 25. You're putting, you said a steel
I think
fence?
it's these,
In the
These
back is the
little
chain link, and in the
circles
front is
with
like the
the wall.
PVC, like, so it comes
I
around
think.
and then switches to chain link.
Are you comfortable with a chain link fence, Sean?
Opposed? Yeah, I'm just trying to see where it calls it out on the plan.
See
Let's
this,
look.
there's a diagonal reference line through a tree that says 25 feet to CLF,
yeah,
chain link fence.
chain link.
Fence, there it is. Well, thanks for making me look like an idiot, Joe, once again. I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's the little circles.
Does he have?
No more questions. We're good.
Okay, motion?
I move that we issue the modification as requested.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next one. Thank you. Next one is, there were small, next three are small projects. NACC number 248, 234 Brentwood Circle.
The proposal work includes removal of 6 dead trunks from multiple trunked ash trees in the rear of the yard. So all of these trees are multiple trunked, and there's only going to be 1 trunk removed from each cluster. All of these trees are fairly close to the BBW and 60 to 70 feet from the house. A crane operated from the driveway will be used for their removal. And staff thought perhaps, due to the proximity of these trees to the wetland, that the commission may want to consider having them cut, further up, to leave some dead wood for habitat. But the homeowner's here this evening if you have any specific questions. Oh, you're the landscaper, I'm sorry. Well, that's good.
So
Can I?
I believe in, preservation of habitat, but I kind of have to look at it in the context of what the rest of the area looks like. Are there other opportunities? Just standing deadwood that's not hauled out in snag habitation, what are we
Right,
really
right.
getting?
There are many more trees than this that are dead. It's a grove of ash, and there may be 25 to 30 trees. I believe they have ash yellows, which is a disease that's common in this area, and there's really no cure. So we're not asking to take all the dead trees out. We're just asking to take out the 6 trunks that we suspect they're leaning toward the house. If they came down, they could, parts could hit the house.
Yeah. And then the rest of them, if they fell, would fall
Would
into the
fall towards the
wetland.
water side. So we're leaving more trunks than we're taking out.
If they were down, they were hollow, and there were nesting areas. Standing deadwood to me isn't necessarily prime habitat. If it was those types, I think there might be an opportunity, but I'm not seeing that from the photographs. So I think, kind of right bottom, yeah. Yeah.
I see. So if they were older snags, you would want to leave them.
Maybe.
We
I
would leave
see.
some of the standing deadwood up.
There's snags in there. There's other
Elsewhere, you
stuff on the property, in the same wetland area, yeah.
Are they occupied?
Not at the, you
The-
mean the
other-
trees?
The other snags that you observe on the property.
No, I haven't noticed
Are
anything.
they occupied, any wood ducks or screech owls or anything living in it?
Nothing that, well, I don't live there, I'm the landscaper, so I'm not there on
Good.
site often, but I have not noticed
Good.
any wildlife.
I'd be more inclined to request it if we had some housing activity taking place. Did you observe any, Amy, at all? or-
No.
No?
Ben
So-
didn't report anything either.
So I'm fine either way then.
Okay.
Whether you leave snags or not, it's,
It was just-
I usually rely upon field notes and observations to see what's actually taking place.
Yeah, I don't think we were on the property to note.
Okay. Well, if
Long
between now
enough
and,
to-
if between now and the time they cut, if you do observe some, you can always,
I think Ben was there.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't know if he
Oh.
was on the property long enough to
Oh, I see what you
observe
mean.
activity in the subject trunks.
Yeah.
so I don't know, are you going back out at any time? Are you gonna
Uh,
have pre-construction?
Yeah, happy to do
So
that.
perhaps if you could do that.
Sure.
Just
Yep,
in case there's some activity taking place,
Sure.
so we don't have a housing shortage for the crates. you know?
We don't want
Okay.
to do that.
Paying rent?
They pay rent.
You're Carol, right?
I'm Carol.
In your narrative, it's silent as to the actual stumps, but I take that to mean that you're gonna just leave the stumps in place. You're not gonna grind them out, you're not gonna
Right.
dig them out, just
No.
gonna leave them.
We're going to leave them.
Okay.
I guess my question's more procedural. This is submitted as a small project, and in the small project requirements, the applicant maintains that the project falls within the small project category below, and activities and/or structures are located outside the 25-foot no disturb, 50-foot no build, and 75-foot no build zone for ephemeral pool. And it sounds like this activity is within the 25-foot no disturb zone, so it doesn't meet the criteria for a small project. I'm not saying the project is no good, but it doesn't seem like it should be submitted and approved as a small project. Am I missing something?
No, so it should be that, we're just making it out.
I would concur with Jack.
I think,
You don't get to be a small project if you're within 25 feet of a wetland. But
yeah, I think all small, oh, I'm sorry.
No, no.
I think all small projects, the criteria for small projects were that no waivers would be requested. And cutting within the 25-foot no disturb zone, I think, is a waiver. So I think it might be a, RDA
RDA.
type
I was
request.
just gonna say, out of fairness to the applicant, I think it seems right to pull. I think it's an RDA, and I think it's approvable that it's craned, if they're craning it out. No real limited ground disturbance, footwork and hauling it away. And in the interest of, safety and because of fear of falling trees towards the
Oh,
house.
yeah.
I think it is an RDA, so I would support it, but yeah, categorically, it just can't be a small project.
So I have to resubmit?
Sounds like.
Okay.
Yeah. Apologies for that. That was our oversight. I mean, I think our thoughts were that these trunks were dead and not
Yeah.
on their
Well, then
way
that would be an
out.
enforcement order. I mean, there's two ways to get to where you want to go. One's an RDA and the other one's an enforcement order.
We can order them to take the trees down.
Right.
But that, we ought not to do that.
No, I would agree.
That's,
Yeah,
I would agree.
okay.
It's just this is
I
a
agree that it's
non-starter.
approvable, but procedurally, I agree with Jack as well.
Okay.
We screwed up the paperwork.
Yep.
So what's the
So-
difference from my,
So the RDA involves a public hearing and a butter notification.
Okay.
uh,
I think I went through the same process recently for the same property. We filled in a pool. I came before you last year because we filled in a pool in the
The
back
Tingling Ground Pool.
on the same property.
Is that already business still open?
I don't think
Was it-
so.
It was,
See, it is.
Oh, it should be? Maybe it is.
well, let's take a look at that.
Okay.
If the order condition is not closed out, we haven't issued a certificate of compliance, and it's still open.
Oh, we may not have. You may not.
Yeah. Was it an,
I don't
or
have a
was
copy.
was it a notice of intent or an RDA? Do you
I
recall?
would say the pool I would say was an RDA.
RDA, yeah.
I think so.
Okay, well, we'll
sent-
look.
We
Let's
had
look.
to send to the, to the
So
abutters.
if it's an RDA that's still within its 3 years, could you amend the RDA, or would you want a new RDA for
No,
the tree work?
if it's within, if it's not expired,
Yeah,
and it's
Oh,
not
awesome,
closed out.
because it was just a
they
year
can-
ago.
They can request an amendment very easily.
I'm doing the same work plus this.
Very simple. That would be-
okay,
Okay.
They have to re-notify. If it's a
Modification.
modification, they don't.
The
So
word
I
is the
think-
modification.
Yeah, so you want to modify it.
Okay, so modify.
right, right.
Whatever the path of least resistance
Okay.
is, provided that they have an open order. And that would be very simple, it would be a letter. And a revised drawing.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. All right,
Be
so
in touch with
I'll
you.
work with you on that.
So the motion is,
So this,
you either continue it, you can withdraw this at
Yeah,
the
why don't
next
you
hearing, or withdraw now. You may as well withdraw now, because we're not gonna approve this. So request for us to withdraw, to,
I request that you withdraw this motion.
So moved.
okay, second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, that's
Yeah,
unanimous.
okay.
Okay. All right, we'll get you straightened out. Okay.
Next one is NACC 249, 31 Sugar Cane Lane.
Okay. All right, so this is a small project permit for removing a stand of 6 red oaks in the backyard that are posing a safety hazard. The trees themselves are about 30 feet away from the house, but 65 feet from the BVW. 65.
The closest one is 65, and a few others are around 80, 90.
Okay, yeah, so the closest of all the trees is 65 feet, with the rest of them further away. Ben had visited this site and here's an aerial. So the blue outlines this area of oaks that they wish to remove. And you also propose to plant native shrubs in front of where the removal will take place?
Right.
Okay. So I think staff is comfortable recommending approval, perhaps asking for a plant list.
Any questions? What's that?
Have myself.
I'm all set.
I'm just reading through the proposal. Are there,
Is the applicant proposing to remove the stumps as well?
Actually, I didn't think about that. Whatever works better is fine. I can leave the stamps or,
It'll work better if you leave them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It'll work better if you leave them.
Okay,
Right.
then I'll leave
Just,
them.
you can just cut them flush and, leave them in the ground intact.
That's my only question.
Sean?
Questions?
Motion?
I move that we approve the small project for NACC 249, 31 Sugarcane Lane as subsection G, pruning of existing vegetation, planting of new native vegetation and gardening.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
And now I move that we grant the application as proposed with the addition of a note that there'll be stumps left and, was there one other thing?
Planting.
And planting, approved planting
If the applicant wishes
plan.
to plant plants, he provides a list prior to that planting.
Precisely.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. You're all set.
Recommended plans, or should I consult?
I can give you a list. Absolutely, yep. So I'll send that to you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Next one is small project, number 250, 136 Carlton Lane. Oh, you have to recuse yourself? For Carlton? You have to recuse yourself for
Not
Carlton
within
Lane.
this one.
Yeah, 136 is further away.
Good.
Okay. So, Ben, this is another one that Ben had done a field inspection. He helped the applicant with the map to make sure it was clear. So the proposal is to remove 7 trees and pruning 4 trees, all that are posing safety hazards to the house and the surrounding property. 10 out of the 11 trees are in the 100-foot buffer zone to an intermittent stream running alongside the driveway. 2 of the trees to be removed and all 4 of the trees to be pruned are in the 25-foot no disturb zone. So I think we've just answered our own question that this is probably an RDA. Yeah. So because these trees are in the no disturb zone, the small project permit doesn't apply, because it's really, small project permits are really meant for projects that don't need waivers, that are out of the no disturb zone, out of the 50 for structures. I think it's approvable as proposed, but I think procedurally, as they just discussed, this is probably an RDA. So.
I think we can take this in slices for discussion, and maybe the applicant's willing to walk away with a piece of that tonight. So 7 trees are proposed to be removed, 2 of them are in the 25, which aren't subject to small project. If he wants to take the other 5 down, we can consider those, and he can just take those other 2 trees off.
That's true.
Pruning of trees in the 25, no, deserve, I need to know if it's selective pruning, and it's only canopy, that's fine too. So I think that's approvable under a small project.
Okay.
But the removal of the 2 trees,
Wholesale
he might have to
removal.
come back and consider it's not
Right.
just simply not worth applying for that separately. And if that's the case, we could take those trees out and just simply not allow that.
That's a good point.
That's my perspective on that. I don't know if it makes sense.
I'm fine with that.
You understand what he's trying to say?
Yeah, sorry, which 5 would be approved? Or I should say, which 2?
The ones greater than 25 feet from the, on the other side of
I
the
would
house
assume-
from the stream.
I would assume these 2 in the back are the ones that are closest to the 25. So if you're looking at your map,
Yep,
the 2 that are closest to the resource area would be the ones that wouldn't be included in what we're talking about tonight.
okay, yep,
And you could do the work on everything else.
perfect, that
If you
sounds
wanted to
great.
exclude those for this here, purposes of this hearing.
Yes, that makes sense.
So all pruning would be allowable.
Yeah, pruning is.
Wholesale removal would,
Well, I use the word selective pruning, which is
Selective-
extremely objective.
selective pruning, right, I mean,
Subjective.
so as to remove the hazard.
Yeah, we don't wanna find out that the tree was pruned right down to the ground.
To
and
the-
there's nothing left.
Yeah, no. We don't intend to do that. They're very beautiful trees, I just don't want him hitting my car as I drive by them.
I got you.
Yeah.
I hear you. So how do we do it? Just amend the diagram to exclude the 2, or just do it in terms of?
The applicant has to amend his
Actually,
request.
cart before the horse, because in order us to condition not doing those trees, it has to be a small project first.
Can I X that out,
Well,
initial
I
it
think
for you?
that's- I think that's what we're doing, all right? We're making it a compliant small project by not considering the 2 trees closest to the resource area.
Trust the
The record will reflect that those 2 trees are being omitted from the application.
Right.
That's all?
As requested
Now,
by the
now,
applicant.
Yeah.
now you're,
That's all.
So, yeah, my thought is, as long as you don't touch anything within 25 feet, it's good. But I would say even pruning trees within a 25-foot no disturb is disturbing and would not be in line with the small project. There's a strict constructualist of our small project, but it doesn't seem like there's any wiggle room. You know, it's not like, except for slight pruning, so. I'm just one person's
yeah.
vote and only look at it that way.
I don't remember us ever allowing pruning within the 25 under a small project either.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of past practice.
I don't know, pruning trees, period.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we,
In a 25?
everywhere, we had, yeah, after several of the big storms, Yes, we absolutely did.
Yeah, under a small project now?
You know, yeah,
Probably administratively.
it may have been an
We-
administrative approval, yep. It may not
We-
have
we
been
have
any
that.
type of project.
We still.
But I do recall that, absolutely, no
Yeah.
question.
I guess we
I
should
do
look at
too.
these this morning.
Especially safety reasons.
So let's just get this, let's knock this one off the bubble so we can move on.
If the applicant would request to remove those 2 trees within the 25 from all disturbance, then we could consider this as a small project.
Okay,
That's-
yeah, I'm in agreement
I think he
with that.
did. I
I'm
think
in
I heard him
agreement
make
with
that request.
Okay. Motion and a,
So,
So I haven't heard a motion. I heard
that
the
check.
person who usually makes a motion saying, you, did you
Sean
make it?
did.
No, I-
You're about to.
I'd like motion.
Sean.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I'd like Sean to make the motion, since
Yes.
he and I were on the small project subcommittee
Yep, just a couple of years ago, right?
just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I know, huh?
Concerning NACC 250136 Carlton Lane, I move that we grant the request, but with modifications and revisions, and that's that there'll be no cutting or pruning of any of the trees proposed to be taken down or pruned within 25 feet of the wetland. Any other conditions? Well, actually, that's just, as a,
It's actually,
as a G,
I thought
in
we
subsection G.
We're allowing them to prune those trees.
Sean says no.
The motion is to not allow.
His motion is his motion is to
Leave 'em
allow,
alone.
is just for right now, purposes of this here, and these guys are off limits.
All right, so
That's
you know,
what-
you know
that's-
that, right? You can't
He
touch
gets
it.
it.
So it can't touch the 2 in the back?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
it.
Correct, but I can prune the ones in the,
Everything
not
else.
in the driveway.
Cut them down.
Yeah, cut or prune, everything outside of the 25.
Yeah, anything within 25.
Everybody-
Well, not anything, we're really getting right, the ones you have picked out.
Yes.
Outside of
right,
the 25.
Right.
Sounds good.
I mean,
Alright, so
we
you have a
can pop
motion?
back out on site with you.
Yeah, the
Ben and I
subsection
can come back out and
So
go
we'll
over.
second his motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous, and
I move that we grant that with any conditions? Do you want any conditions? Post-inspection?
Pre-construction.
Pre and post?
Pre-construction, yeah,
Okay, pre and post
pre and post.
inspection.
Okay,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all righty, thank you.
RDA for 630 Turnpike Street.
All right, let's see here. Turnpike.
Oh, yes, yeah, 6:30, here it is.
All right. Okay, this application is an after-the-fact submittal for work performed within the 25-foot no disturb zone involving installation of evergreen shrubs. The project contractor explained that these shrubs, along with the proposed replacement of the stockade fence, were a requirement of the planning board's special permit approval. This site was subject to a planning board special permit site plan review and approval in July of this year for the construction of a rear mechanical equipment room addition and a front lobby and elevator addition, with associated stormwater improvements to capture the new roof and some of the existing roof runoff. Landscaping is mentioned in the planning board decision, but I feel that the plan is not clear as to what type of landscaping or its location, and a copy of that plan is on your desks. So let me just go through building permit application process. So the applicant submitted a building permit in on January 31st of 2019, and this was for interior demo and remodel. Previous agent, Jen Hughes, signed off as it was interior work only. On August 9th, 2019, siding trim, doors, windows, demo, and repour of rear pad for HVAC and heat exchangers. The applicant indicated in that submittal that the additions per the planning board approval were not moving forward. Therefore, planning staff determined that the special permit conditions were not triggered. Ben, our field inspector, signed off on this permit as none of the work was in the buffer zone. There was a third building permit submitted that added construction of of a handicap ramp at the west side, front and west side of the building, front landing and awning. Planning staff, this work remained out of the buffer as well. Planning staff indicated that these alterations would require planning board review, and as of right now, in viewpoint, the permit has stalled. The chair had asked me to look into how long the pavement has been on site. It appears that paving the site occurred sometime between 1995 and 2001, based on the aerials that I gave you. We have no files on record in the Conservation Department for this property. So after my cease and desist was issued, requesting that application be filed, the fence was installed and arborvitae's planted in front of that. The terminal end of that fence is 45 feet from the edge of wetland, so it's not in the no-disturb zone, but. I visited the site today just to get a handle on current conditions. No work was taking place at that time, but I did notice that there was an area of pavement saw cut around the building and then diagonally off the rear right corner of the building that entered into the buffer, so I'm not sure what that was all about. The contractor's here this evening, if you have questions or have questions for me.
I'd like to speak.
Sure.
All right, first off, we'll start right at the back of the building where she was just talking about the asphalt was broken. So we saw cut it, we're gonna do a patch on that. As far as around the building, that was a sidewalk that was on the original permit with that. And she's saying the special permit wasn't triggered. The special permit has been filed with the Registry of Deeds, number one. Okay, because he still has an option to go forward with the elevator and everything else. On the special permit, you guys requested that we replace the existing fence that was there, the PVC fence. So we agreed to that and plant shrubs or trees in front, which we agreed to do the arborvitae's. This was not something that Mr. Dorrington wanted to do. This was something that was requested to get the original special permit. Okay, we didn't take a fence and just prop a fence up anywhere. We put the fence back in place where it was, which was the neighbors. That was requested by the neighbors and by the planning board on the original permit. And as far as that and the arborvitae's, one thing I will concede to is the shrubs that we had in the front of the building. If you look on the left and the right, we transplanted the shrubs on the left and the right. Mr. Dorrington advised me that it was all set. She come down. I still have not, when she asked me for a cease and desist on the shrubs, I have not replanted any more shrubs since she's asked me to stop. Over there, I planted the shrubs along the back of the fence, which I had over $4,000 worth of dark arborvitae's sitting on site. I'll take them out, I'll move them wherever I gotta do, but at that point, I would've lost all the trees. Okay, so if I gotta get the trees moved, I don't have an issue with that. But as far as the fence is in the existing location that was there. If you look at the original survey and look at the proposed changes, there was an existing fence on location. The fence was falling down, it was dilapidated, and we just removed and replaced. Didn't even dig any holes, we used the original holes that were there.
So we have a whole bunch of play here. We have one wetland that's documented. It's to the east or to the right as you're looking at it from Turnpike Street. I'm not familiar with this lot, but is this one of the old single-family houses converted?
No, it would be a huge house. It was, I don't know.
Which
I don't
one's
know
this?
when the building was built. As far as the asphalt, this is a new owner. He bought the building as is, condition as far as the parking lot is
The house
concerned.
on the corner of Hillside and Turnpike, I think it was a single-family house.
Was it Billy
Big one.
Kent's?
And it was a daycare.
It's been a medical building now for like the last 10, 15 years.
I know which one it is. I know that end of Hillside. I was thinking,
That end.
Okay.
The other side
Okay,
is, the city, is the shed people, and the other house next to that.
Yeah, it's after the shed,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, it's after the
It's
shed?
after the shed. So you go by the shed people, and then there's another, like a yard in between, I believe there's a house. Right after that, there's the property. It's been a doctor's office now for, I believe, the last 10 to 15 years.
So it's not near Hillside, it's farther away.
It's coming up the hill. It's coming towards the satellites.
I know which building
East-
it
You're
is.
east of Hillside Road.
Correct.
Yes.
I do know.
I know where you
Well
are.
put,
Yeah.
All right, so then, so that was issue number one, is I didn't know what the hell it was. Now I
Okay.
do, and I do know the building, okay.
Yeah.
Second thing at play here is the sequence of permitting. So you say,
I
you
would-
guys told us to do. We never told you anything,
No,
you've
no, no,
never
no.
been here before.
We applied for a special permit. That was one of the
Yeah.
conditions,
So-
to
so
remove the fence.
my next point beyond that is, planning board made a decision,
Yes.
and through that process, permitting continues at the building office,
Yeah.
and we sign off on a form, you get circulated. And did we review that?
Which one?
No.
How-
Say that again?
there was some portion, I'm getting a disagreement in some of the narrative from what you had described and what.
You're gonna
Are
need to
you
speak to
Robert?
Monica, yeah, I'm
You're
Robert.
Robert.
You're gonna need to speak to Monica on that, because she's the one that said that everything was all set when we, basically, as far as conservation and everything. When we got the approval, Monica basically told us that as far as the original plan, it was all set.
I don't know Monica. Who's Monica?
Monica's the
she's the-
staff planner, she staffs the
Staff planner,
planning
okay.
board.
Yeah, she staffs the planning
I
board.
just don't know.
All right, I mean, we went through this process for about, I think 6 to 7 months. I mean, nobody's trying to do nothing behind
No,
anybody's
and
back, I mean.
I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
Joe, just even.
at threshold, whether we've got a certain amount of responsibility because of something that we may have overlooked or not noticed, and we'd have to take a different tone and work in a different way, or was it we were never given that opportunity? And that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
So, right, so.
So they went through the planning board process, they got a
Right.
special permit.
Right. and
Now,
it-
I thought you
and
said
we-
that didn't go anywhere.
Permit's been filed with the registry of deeds.
I mean, it's been filed, but they're not moving forward with the additions,
We have the option.
so.
Okay, so what work are they doing? The work are they doing with the building permit?
Yes,
Right,
Did that go through the Form U process?
yes.
yes,
We have one permit that's
Did we
outstanding.
sign off on it?
yes, because they've.
'Cause they weren't doing any site work.
They stayed out of the buffer zone with everything.
So the permit that they, during the building permit process.
Yep.
Planning board permit be damned, through the building permit process, they went, going through the Form U, they were not proposing to do any of the work they've undertaken here.
Right. That's-
Therefore,
That's why we were.
That's why
signing-
you're here tonight, because you are in violation. That's what I want.
I've already paid the triple permit fee to begin with, but the fence.
I just want to put this in perspective, so
Right.
we
Yeah.
didn't screw up. We
Right.
approved a permit
Right.
to allow them to do some interior modifications and none of the site work.
There's 3 permits on the job right now.
Right, so conservation was able to review when the special permit was submitted, and no work was
Which is out of
proposed in the
100.
buffer zone.
When you say the
That's why
buffer
she
zone,
signed the
you mean
Form
no
U.
work
Yeah,
was
that's
done
what
within
he
100 feet of a
said.
wetland?
Yeah.
Isn't that
But
the
that
trigger
parking
mechanism
in the
as to whether it
25?
comes in front of us?
I know.
Right, well, of course, I wasn't, right,
I did some work between,
It's
I'll
on the
admit the work I did. I mean, I replanted the shrubs. I replanted them
Right.
and it was about 40 feet from the
I
buffer
mean, I'm
zone.
trying to simplify this. and-
No, I know.
and-
So
and-
the
and I'm trying to
first-
be really
right,
focused
so
here, but I'm gonna stray a little bit. It's like building an addition to your house, and you don't need a variance. And you go to the building inspector because it meets all of the setbacks, you're clean, he issues a building permit. And I go out and I build a much bigger addition, I get closer to the sideline, and someone calls zoning and says, hey, he's too close. The person comes in to the board, not our board, but their board, and they say, well, what the hell, what gives? Well, I had a building permit. Well, of course you did, but you didn't build what you said you were gonna build.
right.
He's not building what he said he was gonna build.
But I did.
These site improvements are not part of the permit that we signed off on.
The first permit, the first special permit and the first permit I
You're
pulled
not building that special
Had the
permit, that's
fence
where I'm
in.
trying to get to
That's
the
right,
distinction.
That's right.
had the fence in that.
Can I interject just
Do you know a little more on this?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, please enlighten
The
me.
the permit that Jen signed on the Form U was for the building only, which was out of the buffer.
Interior work.
Interior work.
Interior work.
Right.
As far as the parking lot and the fence and,
It never got to us.
never got to
That's
us.
what that's my point. We
Never.
didn't screw up.
That never got in front of our commission.
No, I know, I didn't do the parking lot, number one, so let's get that
I'm
off
not-
the
I'm
table.
not-
That's the issue here, you understand, that's
Yeah.
the issue.
I
Okay.
tried,
I didn't do the asphalt padlock, that's been there.
I
That's been
tried
existing.
to, I spoke with Amy today.
Yeah.
And told them that was gonna be in violation, the commission was not gonna be happy, because the parking lot is in the 25.
But it was.
Part of it is.
It's
But
still
But the
is.
parking lot was existing.
But it was. That aside,
How do
I
we
mean,
know?
not gonna tell
We
them
don't
to
know
rip
it
a
was.
parking lot. What?
We don't know it was.
The parking lot's been there, if you go back to your photos, the parking lot's been there long before I've been there.
She says she did the aerials and it was 1995, it wasn't there.
He didn't even own the building in 1995.
It doesn't matter.
But
What-
understand something, you have to understand, the aerial photos dating back to 95 don't show that paving taking
Okay,
place.
then this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to request.
Okay, hold on a second.
A continuance, because I
One
want to bring in
person
the
at-
attorney.
One person at a time. Mr. Manzi speaking,
Yeah.
allow him to speak, and
Okay.
you'll have another opportunity later on.
That's, I just wanted to clarify that work was not picked up in aerial photos, so it
I
wasn't
was-
done
I was,
back then.
Okay,
It's
well,
new, it's,
I
it's
don't know
new
anything
work,
about
because the
that.
aerial, the photos don't lie.
Okay, so at this point, I'd like to request a continuance and bring in an attorney.
You can
So
absolutely
moved.
request a continuance.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
Fines continue to run.
Yeah.
Fines continue to
Were
run.
fines levied?
Well, I haven't fined, no.
Yeah, I'm fine,
you-
you triple for,
Well,
triple for a fee, and I paid it today.
That's a retroactive.
Yeah,
fee.
and I paid it today, when she requested, I paid
The
it.
fines are a separate item.
So what do we have?
for-
We have a-
for-
we have
For
a-
an unstable area.
What, do we have a
or
violation
non-compliance.
notice out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, cease and desist letter,
Okay, so there's a violation notice out, not an enforcement order.
right.
Okay,
We have to act on enforcement order separately, which will have
We can-
fines tolling back to the date of discovery.
so we can discuss the issuance of an enforcement order. He's continued. We can discuss the enforcement order outside of the
Public hearing.
public hearing, absolutely.
Cease and desist, bring the project into compliance, fines assessed at
Well, we
X number of dollars per day from the date of discovery.
No, he's
And-
he's continued. We can discuss that after. We
Understood.
can do that after.
Thank you.
So you got a second on the
Second,
continuance?
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
So Amy, just so there's no confusion, we will, at the end of the meeting, when the meeting is still open, we'll bring this back for the purpose of enforcement activity.
Okay.
But we don't want to tie up the meeting
Yep, gotcha.
on that right now, okay? Thank you very much.
Okay.
See, you were right. You were right.
Well,
Ah,
every now and then, guys.
Next one is 242-1764. The trustees of reservation.
Was my disclosure on this satisfactory at the
Yes.
last meeting, or do
Yep.
I have to redisclose every time?
No, it's on file,
Okay, thank you.
it's on file. Alrighty. Okay, so revised plans were delivered electronically and hard copies just now, but they only relate to parking space count and ADA parking labeling. So nothing substantive, just really clarifying. Right. The planning board has prepared a draft decision, and planning staff anticipates that the planning board would close on their December 17th meeting. Stormwater review is complete, and our third-party peer review concurs that post-construction conditions will decrease peak flows from what currently exists. Planning staff and myself have walked the area of the culvert that goes underneath Route 125 with the town engineer. He has provided a recommendation to both the planning board and the commission to require that the applicant work with DOT to investigate that pipe and figure out what needs to be done, whether it's clogged and it needs cleaning or what the condition is.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes.
Discussed that for the last meeting,
Mhm.
or if not, I maybe just reviewed it in my head as I read notes. So your analysis was based on zero net runoff. It's all going to where it was going. It's all getting to that corner. It all wants to get underneath 125. And though it's not any greater, in fact, it may even be a little less in flow. The abutter concerns were that water from this project will worsen what's already a bad condition. And I think the situation is that what you're proposing is not going to worsen it, but because of any potential constriction in that pipe, that even though you're getting the water there, it's simply not getting beneath 125. So that's where that's all coming from. If there is an obstruction or breakage or blockage or whatever it is in that culvert, getting underneath Route 25. If the state cleans it up, it's their pipe. Those abutter concerns probably go away. So that's where that's all coming from.
And just for the record, we did have a meeting with Mass DOT because of our permit requirement and notified them of that situation. And they were going to look into it.
In our lifetime?
No, they said that they were going to look into it. So we notified them of this situation and
They have a $2 million project, 1,000 feet down the road.
It doesn't mean anything.
Sounds like a change order.
Not even.
You've dealt with them many times, you know how they.
I know. Enough of that.
Yes, I agree.
I'm all set.
Yeah,
I'd like to defer at this time.
okay. It's a cart before the horse again. We're approving a project that doesn't have a street opening. And that bothers me. And the state says that they're not gonna approve it until we approve it and planning approves it, and then they'll think about it. It doesn't make sense to me. At least if they gave us a letter and said, we will approve a street opening if conservation and planning are satisfied with your project.
Chairman, we did meet with Mass DOT 3 weeks ago, and they did not see a problem whatsoever with the street opening. However, they will not issue a letter saying that they will approve it. You know, yes, chicken, egg, cart, horse.
Right.
We did our best. you
No, I
know.
understand. I appreciate what you've done. You can see what my contention is, the same thing with the pipe. You're diverting the water to an area that's supposed to drain under 125, and they're gonna look at it. Well, there's abutters that are worried about getting water, which we pretty much proved that the,
That's why I was very careful to say that this analysis proves it's no greater.
No.
No greater volume, no greater
Zero.
velocity.
Zero net.
Than what's already there now.
right.
It doesn't ameliorate the problem, because their problem is not attributed to anything on the trustee's land, it's the inability of that water to get underneath the highway.
Right.
But their
Well,
project does no.
Well, I would just hope that, because we can't do anything, but you guys, even if you get approved, we would appreciate it if you continue fighting for that drainage pipe.
Yes, sir.
You know, because you're gonna be the catalyst to make this happen. We can't. And the street opening, I hope you get it. I just, I hate to see you spend all this money and then not give it to you. That's it. Go ahead, your turn.
I agree on the cart and horse thing. I know that water has been flowing down there forever. I've walked through it in looking at a prospective house on Old Village Lane, and it's to clean a culvert, to eliminate a lot of anxiety from these homeowners is a simple thing to do. It's general maintenance, and it should be done. I'm not the one to do it,
We don't have
so
any-
I
we
feel
don't have any
helpless.
teeth.
Yeah, but
And
we shouldn't be penalizing the applicants
No.
because
And-
the state's taking no action. That's not,
I totally agree. I feel bad for the group of people that stood before us more than once and expressed their issues of flooding, well, the water that flows down there, which is ankle deep, probably 8 months out of the year. So, but on the merit of the project, I'm in favor of it.
Sean,
No questions.
motion.
I
So-
moved, Amy?
I'm
I
sorry.
just want to make sure, we received a letter that was addressed to the planning board and CC to the commission from neighbors that live on Andover and Wood Lane and Village Lane. Most of their comments and requests are germane to the planning board's jurisdiction. Paragraph 12 speaks to the drainage issues and the concerns. And I promised that I would, share that with you. I received it this afternoon, so that's why it's on your desks.
I have it.
Like Joe said, there is no more increase in water from the project now versus the way existing conditions are. So we really can't, as long as it's the same or less, then we're fine.
It meets our requirements.
It meets our requirements.
Our order of conditions requires that the pre and post match.
Right.
So as long as they comply with our order of conditions, that's the most, and that's the best that we should do.
Right. And there's the same token again, you should reinforce with the abutters to complain about that pipe. Because the squeaky wheel gets the most grease. And then that'll eliminate a lot of the water. You know, so they might be happy with this project going forward because they get their pipe cleaned.
Well,
All right,
I don't know who's gonna be happy, I've read the memorandum, but it's,
Right.
I
Yeah.
can't say that we're making anybody happy.
Well, we
but-
can't make
but
everybody
I think we have
happy.
to follow, I think we have to follow the law on what our responsibility is here, and that's what we should be doing right now.
So let me ask the follow-up questions, the cart before the horse scenario that you were laying out. You didn't go blindly into this curb cut. You designed it using engineering standards. You know typically what DOT is looking for. You believe this is it.
Yes.
And the only thing they could do is say, well, we need greater sight distance. They may ask for trees to be removed within their right-of-way. But if they're within 25 foot of either of those fingers, you're gonna be back with a modification request to do that.
Right.
So that's the only risk, you know, DOT, we all know, several of us have dealt with DOT in the past. Some of us regularly. It's what they are. And, you know, as long as you've done your diligence, you've got a heightened level of confidence that, you know, you're fine.
Yes,
They can throw a curveball at you.
yes, they can.
yes, they can.
I'm all set.
All right, so we need a motion.
Can I ask a
Sorry.
question in regards to the order of conditions? In reading the draft, it requests that we have at least once a week, once during each week in construction, have it monitored for a erosion control monitor. Is that a standard practice here in, I mean, once a week, that's a lot, pretty frequently.
The frequency is usually determined by the risk.
Yep,
So apparently, there's a consensus that there's a higher risk, so the monitoring would be more frequent. We have some projects where the monitoring is daily and ongoing,
right.
And this is not that,
and this is not that, I'm just putting it out there.
And is that just for your jurisdiction?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, our jurisdiction is so
Only-
long as it remains
We're just talking about Concom.
vulnerable.
Yep.
It's not stabilized and not yet established.
correct.
We're gonna expect that, and, you know, sometimes we might even say that it might even be conditioned on, you know, certain storm significance, 2 inches or greater in less than a 4-hour period. Sometimes we go to that extent on a slope. But
Sure.
if you find that everything is stabilized and the risk is gone and the erosion controls are working, after a few weeks, the next meeting, you come in and request that be amended.
Okay,
that
great,
be modified.
thank you.
All right, so we need a motion,
I'm offering it.
okay? I need a second.
Anyone in the audience?
Are there any butters to this project? I don't think so, I think they're.
Well, let's
Okay,
ask.
just want to make sure.
It's already sealed.
Let's make sure.
Wanna make
Any
sure.
butters that want to speak on this project?
Okay.
None answer. Accordingly, I move that we close and issue 21 days or less.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you.
Thank
too.
you, thank you.
Good luck with that mass
Should
tie.
mention that to Robert before you throw it off.
What's that? No, we can't do that. He might want to post it out.
No. Trust me on this,
I agree. 242-1764 High Street, request to continue till January 8th. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, and that's unanimous. Next one is 242-1762 95 Lions Way.
Okay, Commission will recall This project involves replacing an open stormwater detention basin with a subsurface Cultec infiltration chamber. The town engineer in the beginning had requested, had substantive comments and required the project engineer to perform additional evaluation and provide additional information. Project engineer has responded satisfactorily to the town's request for additional information and has and the town engineer has provided recommendations for conditions of approval. And that information was included in your packets. Thank you. I had performed a site inspection in the very beginning. And I found the wetland line to be reasonable. I did mention at the first hearing that I observed some violations in the no disturb zone that I think should get addressed. And we could talk about that a little bit later. That's really all I have at the moment.
Just to add to what Amy mentioned, at one of the continuances, the commission asked that the abutters be re-notified, and that's been done.
That's right, sorry.
And I
Thank you.
gave Amy the paperwork. As you can see on your plan, the 100-foot buffer zone is highlighted in yellow. So the majority of the work itself is outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, but of course, the detention pond discharges into the wetland, and that's why we filed a notice of intent. The pond itself is overgrown with trees and shrubs. It's not maintained by the town. This pond does collect drainage from the subdivision, from the roadway. So essentially, I'd like to just put this pond underground, and this area will be maintained as a lawn area.
So very lawn area and maintained, but the reality is, this is a public way. Lions Way is accepted as public way. It's the drainage facility that's there now is accepted as part of the subdivision acceptance. So the town owns the easement rights and the system and the obligation, they own the obligation to maintain it as well. So what really is happening here is a private entity is building the stormwater improvement to regain some of the surface yard back, and the town is agreeing to maintain that subsurface system. I know they looked at it from a functional hydrologic analysis perspective, and they know it works. But what I'm not reading anywhere is, because it's in the easement, that prior acceptance of the way through town meeting, does that allow someone to go in and put a new structure in? And does the town have to accept the new structure?
I had sent Monica an email, she's head of the planning department, to see what steps we'd have to take with planning board. She didn't get back to me, but she did mention to the engineer that this would just be a minor modification, and she didn't see a problem with that.
Modification to what?
To the
To the-
subdivision approval.
Now, that hasn't been done yet, but that's the goal.
So I think,
I don't know.
I mean, I have no problem with the project. I think analytically, it's been looked at and studied right. I think it's designed right. John Bourgeois says as much. But I think that our order conditions needs to be very explicit. We're issuing the order conditions to a private property owner, obligating the town to perpetually manage the system. If the town doesn't manage it, the private homeowner is in violation of their order conditions.
So who agreed on behalf of the town to?
Nobody, that's my point, is nobody's done that. I think we need that instrument, someone from the DPW Director's Office with approval from the vote of the Board of Selectmen, that the town will accept the construction of the system as a gift, and that the town will then be obligated to carry out the perpetual maintenance conditions as set forth by the Conservation Commission.
Do they accept that often, or is that a high order?
I've never heard of this
Yeah.
before. I've been in this business a long time.
It's a non-starter, as they call it?
But didn't the town engineer,
All he looked at was the
Well, yeah,
analysis.
I mean, they-
town engineer has reviewed this, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he reviewed the design, but he didn't review the maintenance.
He didn't agree to do it.
I mean, just think, never mind that minutia, because I think it's important minutia, but put that aside for a second. We're about to issue an order of conditions, perhaps, to a private landowner. And typically, when you build a structure, we obligate the private landowner to maintain the system. We're not doing that in this instance. We're obligating a third party.
Well, we could.
Who's the third party?
Well, I mean, we always obligate the applicant to do it, and 90% of the time, the applicant subs it out or contracts it out and delegates it to another party. I mean, it's unusual that the town is the other party. Usually it's, by contract or something like that. Whether it's a lessee or lessor doing to a lessee or.
The
we don't-
detention pond, it's not maintained right now. There's
That's my problem.
good-sized
That's exactly my
trees.
concern, is that this would
that-
need to be, right?
Not a mile.
I mean, you have inspection ports, you have water quality inlets. I mean, there are things that need to be maintained and dealt with on a pretty regular basis that aren't obvious to the town. I think it's an issue, and I think it's solvable, and I just don't know how Public Works brings that. I think the Public Works Department has to bring that forward. I think the applicant brings it forward to the Public Works Department in an official manner. Public Works brings it to the Board of Selectmen, says, yeah, we'll take that on. And that becomes an annex to the acceptance from town meeting.
Maybe you can explain, so what was the actual communications and statements about who said they, on behalf of the town, that they are going to maintain this?
There really hasn't been any communication. The engineer had initially reached out to planning to see if this was even a possibility. And planning was busy, we didn't get any response from planning. So the next step was, well, let's bring it to conservation and let's see if this is even possible.
And when you say the term "this," what do you mean by this?
The project
The
itself.
project itself.
If it's even possible, can we
Yeah.
even permit it? So then the commission said, well, have the town engineer review it, make sure it's up to snuff and that it'll function as it does now.
Yeah, and he did
And,
that.
and here we are, so,
And I think it does all of that.
right.
I
As
think
long as it's
I
maintained.
think we're just wrestling with the perpetual maintenance of it and the town owning the structure. Nobody officially knows about this being their property coming forward.
I mean, I can certainly do some research if the commission likes, reach out to the DPW as suggested, or planning, or I'm not sure who else. Selectmen?
So we're ready to close for no other reason other than this question. So if we were to condition, as we normally do, obligate the property owner in perpetuity, be responsible for operations and maintenance of the subsurface drainage system, it's legit. That permit would be legit, whether it's on town property, within the town easement or whatever, it doesn't really much matter. It's still, it's their project, we're obligating them. That motivates them to get that to the town. They can do that offline.
What obligates the property owner to continue the maintenance once we close this?
Our permit. What obligates anybody with perpetual condition?
Who does the checking to make sure they're doing it, and what's the remedy?
Yeah, hypothetical or reality?
Same for every, same for every project.
Well, that's-
Every project.
Well, but this is something that's different than every project. This is something that has the potential to go very badly if the homeowner, this homeowner, yeah, no problem, they sell the house in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then the next homeowner, you see how this happens.
Yep.
And then what? So,
You guys aren't gonna build this winter, right?
Correct. When
I see no harm in taking a few
That's-
weeks.
that's
Dot your
fine.
i's, cross your t's. This can be answered, it just needs to be documented in some way.
That's not a problem. I can continue the meeting and try and
Thanks for
fish out the
cleaning, sir.
avenues.
To be truthful, I would rather see the homeowner be responsible for maintaining the drainage system than the town, because the town does not to pick on the town, just things that they are supposed to maintain, they don't have the manpower.
I understand that.
No, they just can't. That's why the detention pond is in the way it is, because nobody maintains it. So, but, I'm in agreement with you. I think that we should get the legal ramifications.
So I move that we continue. I've lost track. January is our next
January 8th.
8th.
January
The
8th.
holidays coming up. What's one after that? 22nd?
Or even the first meeting in February?
February 5th.
February 5th, sounds good to me. I move that we
Okay.
continue to February 25th.
For discussion,
Yep.
second for discussion. Is the, I'm concerned about the discharges of those, of the infiltration system. Is it discharging directly into the wetland?
Yeah, so you see where there's a retaining wall at the end of the drainage pipe? That's where the outfall is right now. And that's where it's proposing to stay. We're not changing that.
Okay, I'm not sure how we missed this, but we typically ask that it discharge ideally just at the 25-foot no disturb zone to provide some treatment prior to wetland, that it's not a point source into the wetland. Okay, I would ask that the applicant and the engineers consider doing that as part of this project.
That's something we could look at. So this subdivision was approved, I believe, in '98. And I think at the time, it probably discharged further from the wetland area, but because you have a wall there, the wetland has grown into up to that pipe. So I think that's what kind of developed
I
over the
see.
past
Yep.
20 years or what have you.
And I know it, I don't want to belabor it, but, and I know you have a wall there, so that's the natural place where you'd normally discharge. I'd ask them to consider that, though.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Sean?
No question.
Okay, so we need a motion to continue till,
We already made the
We-
motion.
motion and second.
all
Yep.
those in favor say aye.
Aye,
Opposed?
first meeting in February.
Thank you.
Next one is 242 1766 1600 Osgood Street. And before you speak, Michael, I would like to hear from subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, the reduced membership of the subcommittee met last Wednesday, and we wish Doug Sell the best in his recovery. You know, I know he's very much interested in this project moving forward and was a contributing member to the subcommittee discussions, but, you know, nobody wants bad health, and he's suffering a little bit these days, I hear, so you know, nothing but the best. But anyway, we made some great headway. We have on each of these subcommittee meetings, and I think as the discussions move forward more formally through the applicant's discussion, you're going to find some of the uncertainties and some of the questionable things that may have been of concern to the broader membership of the commission in the past resolved. We made some great headway in that regard. We've continued upon recognition of what materials are on demolition we're concerned with and how we're going to use them in the project, and we've looked at the various phases of pavement construction and infiltration vulnerabilities and where the foundation walls are as compared to groundwater, documented, establishing measurement protocols to establish what pHs and to be able to even monitor where groundwater is during construction, and I think you're going to be pleased. I certainly hope so.
Sounds
Jack?
I concur, Joe. That's
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the committee, subcommittee?
Not at this point.
No. My question is where do you think we're at on this project?
I think we are at a position where we await planning board to complete their process. We will likely hear concluding information tonight, which would allow us to gather the end of the information we need to gather. However, administratively, because of constructive schedules and dates and eligible membership for voting, we have to be very careful that we have, those members at the table and not gather any information between him. So I think it's where we're at. I think we're gonna be there tonight.
Okay, good, thank you.
Remains to be seen. Mike,
All right.
Mike might drop the ball.
It's all yours.
That's tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is Mike Howard from Epsilon Associates. We are appearing tonight in front of the commission on behalf of Hillwood Enterprises LP. Just some introductions of some familiar faces you have seen over the past several months. No particular order. Mac Utse, is that right, Mac? Utse, thank you. Mac Utse from Hillwood, he's representing the applicant. Ryan Woolstrom, where's Ryan? Sitting back there. Ryan's from Langen Engineering. Tim O'Neill, who's been in that hot seat in front of the commission for a couple of hearings, is back again tonight. And to Tim's left is Jamie Barr, also from Langen Engineering. Langen's been working closely with Epsilon and Hillwood to move this project along to a point where we hope the commission is comfortable moving forward within order conditions. So this is our fourth public hearing with the commission to discuss and respond to questions the commission has had. This is obviously a very important project for the town. In conjunction with those public hearings, we have also participated in 3 separate meetings with the commission subcommittee to focus on discrete technical matters associated with the project, primarily, as Joe indicated, on topics of stormwater management, construction sequencing and phasing, soil and groundwater conditions, and most importantly, the proper use of RCA on the site. Because several months have passed since we originally filed the notice of intent, we had our initial hearing presenting the project. With your permission, Mr. Chair, I would just like to take a moment to review where we started and kind of where we stand today, and then we'll transition into some of the more recent discussions we had with the subcommittee relative to commitments the applicants made to the town in its filing. So as with our original filing, just to remind the commission, project will not result in any work in the commission's 25-foot no disturbance zone or the commission's 50-foot no construction zone, other than the buffer zone and resource area restoration work that we're proposing, removing pavement, returning those areas to natural environments. As the commission knows from reviewing the site plans, the vast majority of the project site is located well outside the 100-foot buffer zone. The project continues to incorporate more than 11 acres of pavement removal from the site, with those areas being restored to native meadow habitat. Within those 11 acres, more than 5 acres are within riverfront area or buffer zone. Those are comprised primarily of pavement. That pavement, as we've described before, will be removed and restored also to upland meadow habitat, similar to the adjacent habitats on the site, and given that larger contiguous area that we've been striving for. Project will create more than 54,000 cubic feet of additional flood storage on the site relative to existing conditions and well in excess of what is required by local and state regulations. Stormwater management system, as the commission is aware, is relatively antiquated in most portions of the site. This project proposes substantial upgrades to that stormwater management system to bring it into compliance with current standards under the referenced regulations. And again, this was described in our original filing, but even though the site constitutes a redevelopment project under those stormwater standards, the system that has been designed by the project team has been designed to fully comply with Mass DEP standards as if it were an undeveloped site. Related to that, as the commission will also recall, there are several old orders of conditions on the property, most of which have received certificates of compliance with perpetual conditions on stormwater management of the different stormwater management systems out there. Through this process, we have updated and consolidated all of the old stormwater maintenance plans to meet your current standards, while also making them easier to follow and implement with the color coding scheme that you may recall from prior hearings for each of the 2 property owners on the site, and of course easier for the commission and its staff to follow up on when conducting compliance inspections down the road. We thought that was an important improvement to the maintenance plans. So I'm going to turn to a handful of slides that are in front of the commission now, and Amy, if you don't mind, I'll prompt you when I switch the thinking. So building upon what Joe and Jack laid out, and continuing on the theme of those topics, we're going to now turn towards the more recent discussions and some of the follow-up items that we've had from the commission or the subcommittee since our last meeting. The first item we wanted to follow up on or report back on is some lab results. The commission had concerns that the yellow brick on the existing buildings might potentially contain asbestos that would need to be obviously remediated and handled properly during demolition. As we discussed at the subcommittee meeting last week, we sampled those bricks. Lab results came back yesterday, and the lab results are in front of the commission now. No asbestos was determined at any level within those yellow bricks. So that is one issue the commission should feel comfortable has been resolved. Commission expressed concerns regarding the use of the recycled concrete on the site based on their experiences, justified experiences with other projects, which we acknowledge and we accept. That has certainly been a major focus point of our subcommittee meetings. Through those meetings, we believe we've made significant progress on this topic in an effort to address the commission's concerns as much as possible. Amy, could you switch slides, please? And you can stop there. Thank you. So first, the commission will recall that the applicant originally proposed to use RCA throughout the entire upland portions of the site, including beneath proposed parking areas and internal roadways and things of that nature, as well as the building areas. Based on feedback from the commission at earlier hearings, the plan was revised to exclude the use of RCA in any Conservation Commission jurisdictional area, including the 100-foot buffer zone, floodplain, and riverfront area. At that and this point in the review process, RCA is not and was not proposed in any areas that are subject to the jurisdiction of the commission under the act or the bylaw, and that remains the case today, and we're not proposing any changes to that. We've kept it outside of your jurisdiction. That said, jurisdiction notwithstanding, we have continued to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the commission to avoid the potential for after-the-fact jurisdiction during construction that I know both the commission and the applicant are concerned about, and we appreciate that. So that's what we've been focusing on. We're trying to avoid that very scenario that you are also trying to avoid, and we've been working towards that. We know there were some experiences in other unrelated projects where the RCA, in our opinion, was applied incorrectly, resulting in alterations to resource areas, a comparison which we think is apples and oranges to our project and does not apply. So, through further discussions with the subcommittee, building upon the slide that's in front of you now, which took everything outside of jurisdictional areas, we then proposed to exclude the use of RCA within or near any stormwater infiltration basins. And Amy, if you could please go to the next slide. Thank you. This one's a little bit tougher to read. If you look at it carefully, you'll see a couple blue callouts I have in the top right corners. So let me give you an update at this point in the review cycle. So in conjunction with these ongoing efforts, we then incorporated a significant safety factor of 2.
Pause just for a second.
Please.
It seems like what Mike's trying to do is lay out a sequence of how we've reduced the use of the RCA. So these are the culmination of many of our different subcommittee meetings, from the initial filing to let's minimize it some more, let's minimize it even more. So this is now the third step that Mike's about to.
Correct, that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Still 2 meetings to go.
Yep. So thank you, Joe, for clarifying that. So at this stage in our reviews, if you will, the subcommittee asked us to not only keep the RCA out of the infiltration basins, which is where you experience problems in other projects, but consider a buffer, and then consider a buffer on top of that buffer to provide an additional safety factor, which we did. And that analysis was based on groundwater data, certain engineering assumptions, and design criteria that Langen's engineers presented to Joe and Jack at these meetings. That analysis resulted in what we call the 26-foot wide setback zone from these infiltration basins where no RCA would be used, thus eliminating the potential of any RCA or RCA fines from finding their way into the infiltration systems and underlying groundwater and potentially migrating into down gradient resource areas. That's where we left off at this stage of the process. Commission subcommittee was satisfied at that time with these design measures, but they continued to express concern that RCA used in proposed proposed pavement areas throughout the larger site could, over time, be subject to infiltration as pavement cracks and splits, and thus pushing fines down into the water column, and again, potentially migrating further. More importantly, the concern was during that time period, large areas of the RCA would be exposed and uncovered on the site during construction until it was finally stabilized. In those instances, and under those time periods, potentially it could be subject to infiltration from rain events until it's stabilized and covered with asphalt, thus necessitating interim stabilization measures and so forth. And that's where we left off at that point in the review process. Next slide, please, Amy. You can skip that one, Amy. I'm sorry. That one's perfect. Thank you. So to address that concern, which was a significant challenge for us, at our most recent subcommittee, my client, Mack and Hillwood, agreed to eliminate the use of RCA from any areas scheduled for asphalt paving, including all parking areas and interior roadways throughout the entire project site. So those areas in yellow is where the RCA was previously proposed and is no longer being proposed, as well as near any infiltration basins. It's been eliminated from this part of the site design. Those areas in yellow total about 26 acres of where the RCA would have been spread during those different phases of construction. To address concerns about what to do with the RCA that will be kept on site, the RCA that will remain will only be placed beneath the footprint of the building and its foundation. Encapsulating the RCA beneath the building completely eliminates the potential for any infiltration into the groundwater below. It's completely covered by the slab and the building itself. As an added safety factor, a minimum separation of 3 feet is proposed between the groundwater elevation and the bottom of the RCA, but it's completely cut off from any infiltration from precipitation events. Can you go to the next slide, please, Amy? This is just a zoomed-in detail of what we talked through with the subcommittee last week. We've added a note showing the minimum groundwater separation between the RCA and the groundwater. Next slide, Amy. The other thing that we talked about with the subcommittee is there's still going to be, temporary stockpiles of RCA during construction. This was a slide that Tim presented to the commission a couple hearings ago. We've included a detail during those temporary stockpiling phases where the RCA will be placed on top of a poly liner. It will be covered by a poly liner whenever it's not in use. It will be surrounded by poly-wrapped hay bales and compost filter tubes and silt fence while those piles are on site during construction and before they're placed beneath the building slab. And then lastly, one additional important clarification on this topic, just so there's no confusion. The applicant never proposed nor would propose to import any additional RCA onto the site, okay, as backfill material. The 30,000 cubic yards of import material that we made reference to in the notice of intent was always going to be what we called clean material, necessary to construct the project. The definition of clean material, as we know from other projects, can be subjective. I know the commission has over time developed special conditions to try and narrow that down, so there's no confusion as to what clean material is or imported fill might be. We presented, I'm just going to hand this out. We presented to the subcommittee to give them some comfort that we were on the same page, and we acknowledge that this would be morphed into whatever your ultimate special conditions are on this topic. But clarity regarding what that spec would be for the imported material, including as requested by the commission, a commitment to have it certified as clean when it arrives at the site. And we can certainly work with the commission as to what certification might constitute, whether it's a bill of lading or whatever, but we think that's a workable issue that we're comfortable honoring. And then finally, we've also updated the pH monitoring protocol frequency to biweekly and within 24 hours of a storm event that is greater than 0.1 inches. I have a revised protocol that I'll present to Amy tonight to round out the discussion. So we've obviously been doing a lot of work with the subcommittee between the hearings. We very much appreciate not only the commission, but the subcommittee's time working with us on these topics. We have the full team here, Mr. Chair, to answer whatever questions the commission might have regarding what I discussed and whatever else you might want to discuss this evening. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
I was very satisfied with what I heard. It's a professional summation of where we've been for these past 5 or 6 weeks in committee, and I think we're on the right track.
I have questions. But before I start asking my questions, and I don't have that many, I'm very specific in one area. I have no objection to the project, as you know, and I have no objection to any portion of it except for the RCA. I have a real issue with it.
Understood.
I understand the reduction you've offered, and I thank you for your effort. I want to clarify, I guess, what I just heard. I'm looking at this plan. It's got the blue building and the yellow paved area. It doesn't have a number on it, so I can't reference what page it is. But if I understood you correctly, the blue area, the building, is the only area where you're proposing to use RCA underneath that building. So that's a big reduction, and I appreciate that. My question would be, how would you propose to encapsulate it so as to not have migration over time at some point, have the fines move down towards the riverfront area? How would you be able to do that? But more importantly, in the interim period, and you discussed it, when there's on-site storage and construction is when the greatest danger can happen. I don't think it's any mystery. I think we know what RCA, when mixed in the soil and compressed underneath, we know what it can do. We've seen it. We have a geologist that's been working with us who has educated us to it. Because of that, we've actually added RCA to the boilerplate of prohibited materials on projects in town. I personally consider it to be a poison, and I think that I doubt that there's anybody that's had enough exposure to this material that could successfully argue differently right now. We're still in the learning stage, and one of our first stages of learning has indicated what it can and does to both surface and groundwater by means of raising pH levels to the point of hazmat readings. So that's my concern. That's where I'm at. So I see where you're saying, okay, we're gonna put it under the building. The yellow area, you're gonna use reclaimed asphalt. No objection. No objection. It's the RCA that I'm struggling with. And part of my struggle is we're really just only scratching the surface on learning what this junk is, and how it interacts with soil when it's compacted, when water passes through it, when the fines migrate. That's where we're seeing the damage. I know that's something that would and should concern you too, and I'm sure it should concern the applicant, because as you pointed out, worst case scenario, it becomes jurisdictional, which is not what we want. So I guess I'd be looking for more information from you as to the safeguards that you would propose when we have those crazy 100-year storms that just pop up, when you have a gigantic pile of RCA laying about, waiting to go somewhere. How do we do that? How do we, for lack of a better word, how do you guarantee the safety? That's what it's all about to me. I'm a one-issue voter on this one. So help me out here.
Could I ask you, thank you, Al. I just want to make sure I understood your questions. Can you just rephrase your two questions again? Then I'm going to ask Tim and Jamie to respond, but I just want to make sure I understood the questions that you want answers to.
Well, the first question is, if you were permitted to put the RCA underneath the building, the blue building, how would you propose to encapsulate and barrier that material so that it could not move, it could not migrate through the various types of groundwater movements that take place? But before you get there, you're talking about, you have to stockpile it somewhere, pending construction. How do you keep it from going anywhere during the stockpiling? I mean, I've seen many stockpiles, they move.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Mike's fabulous presentation kind of glossed over quickly two very important details, and they're on the screen here to address that, because we recognize the same thing, and hopefully they're gonna give you a little more comfort when you look at them in more detail.
I need a lot of comfort, and I
Right.
appreciate you taking
lot
the
more.
time to,
So this is a very robust detail for our stockpiling, and it actually uses two forms of poly sheeting to keep the soil in place so that absolutely nothing will run off. The first layer of defense is the poly sheeting that goes on the ground before anything is stockpiled on top of it. You can see that bold line on the bottom there. That sheet actually goes up and wraps around a hay bale barrier on the down gradient side so that any rain that does fall on top of that pile will pool within the poly sheeting and not run off from the pile. And the second poly sheeting is actually draped over the material that's put on top of the base sheeting, so that when water does eventually fall on top of the pile, it won't be taking sediment from the RCA or whatever materials are underneath the tarp and running them off the sides of the pile. So there shouldn't be any rilling or migration of soils from the stockpile location. And then on top of that, we have our traditional stockpiling perimeter controls with fiber rolls and silt fencing to catch anything that may run through the pile or anything that comes towards the pile and divert it.
The other piece, Jamie Barr with Langen. The other piece I'd like to mention, it's not noted on here, but the poly sheeting that goes over these materials is secured down, weighted down. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen piles that haven't been, and the poly sheeting just blows all over the place. In my 20 years of doing this, and specifically my expertise are in soil management, these piles get polyed and secured, weighted down. That can be with materials on site, that can be with, any number of ways to do that, and that prevents any rainwater from hitting the materials that we have underneath the piles. And so initially it hits the poly coating, and then pools as clean water within the bermed area of the stockpile.
Contain it at the bottom, place it dry, keep it dry.
Yes.
Any water that accumulates, at that point, you do need to quantify the water quality before you manage it.
Correct.
You can't let that just overtop. So those are all critical elements on the erosion control and measures as part of the project submission. Plus, this is not gonna be just one gigantic pile. There's going to be strategically many of these in manageable sizes, where it's best used around the site,
Correct.
in various parts of the project.
That's correct.
So that's the containment piece of it, I think. This is what you would do with oil-saturated soils that came out of a gas station, and it's 100% acceptable to all requirements. So this is the same principles being used for a far more inert, but still concerning type of material.
Same principles for hazardous materials. This is the same.
So the other piece that I wanted to show that might gloss over quickly, and I think I saw that on the slide up there, is if you go to the cross-section that shows the foundation, right there. So we talked about this at great length too. So not only is it only under the building to prevent vertical migration, what we have is that groundwater separation, which is no less than 3 feet above the highest level, which under ambient conditions could easily be 8 feet over groundwater level. So we're keeping it way, way, way above the highest groundwater level and contained within the perimeter of the footings. So the lateral migration would have to literally pump down and under the foundation in a saturated condition, which will never happen.
Which could happen during construction, prior to sealing the top off. The potential, which is what we've learned occurred on another site, where we had vertical infiltration of stormwater prior to the stormwater system going online, which caused the highest rate of horizontal migration that we saw on that project.
I don't think we could ever measure, we tried to get that particular applicant to measure its source. We felt, and they felt, but they could never prove, that the origin of the water infiltrator was the infiltrators directly percolating it down into this vulnerable layer.
That was
And
the-
not so much what was falling from above. But they could never, they did dry weather monitoring and did wet weather monitoring, and they did see increases in wet weather, but they couldn't attribute it to the infiltration or not. So that, we still think that was because they were literally percolating it in through the infiltrating structures. But they weren't able to prove that one way or the other. What they simply did is decided to do a cutoff curtain, pump and treat, and just not even bother to go through the effort of understanding it, just deal with it.
Understood, and I understand why, because it got ahead of us. And we didn't issue a deconstruct order. You and I have known each other a long time. One of the biggest things that I hate is the word oops. And we hear it every now and then, and it's always under the worst conditions. And it's always when we're looking at the worst scenario. And this is a scenario that just has great potential to do a lot of damage. And nobody can really argue either way, because we're still the learning curve on this stuff. This is a material that's relatively new, and the learning curve on it is everybody's experiencing the learning curve. Anyway, that's the basis for my concern right now. I'm gonna go down the table and.
Question, you said you're gonna put it under the building. How thick are you gonna put it?
That's ultimately going to be up to the contractor, depending on the volumes and how they actually treat the material. It can be used in one of two ways. One, you can put in a 100% thick layer of RCA with no mixture to it, or you can actually mix it into your fill material. So depending on how they actually decide to treat it, it could be a thicker or thinner layer.
The reason why I'm asking, because I'm agreeing with him that RCA has issues. But if it's applied properly, it's fine. If it's used for a subgrade,
We don't know that.
well, let me finish. If, it's been around for a long time. However, but that, how it's applied in this, it's gonna make a should make a difference. Also, is we're all like, this one says this is no good, this one says it's good. Why can't we have an analysis of the material?
Because the material standing alone, what caused the problems that we've experienced is the material reacting to other conditions. The material being mixed with soil, being compressed with a foundation, having water move through it, which had caused the reaction. I'm obviously, the reason we hired a consultant for the other project is because there really is nobody here that's qualified to comment on it. That's the reason we went with an expert, third-party expert.
Well, I've seen it used many, many times.
Lou, I've been on this commission since 1990. I've never seen RCA until this year.
Oh.
I've never seen it.
You've never seen, I think, let me say it differently. There, it's been used on, I guarantee it's been used on dozens, if not hundreds of properties. And it's never been a problem because it was used properly.
There's no
We can't say
doubt in
that
my
because
mind.
has anybody gone back and tested the down gradient water from these projects, on these hundreds of projects? The answer is no. The answer is no. There's no post-construction testing being done. We don't know anything about this stuff, except what we do know is what we've seen it do. That's, I mean,
Then we go the same gamut as far as, I hate to do this, recycled asphalt. It has as much contaminants as asphalt, because it has oil, it has wherever it got milled out of, we don't know where it's from. It could have just as many contaminants as recycled asphalt.
well, you could sell me on banning that
And
too,
we
then, if
use,
you want.
that's why I don't want to do it.
Our job is, and don't take this the wrong way, but our job is not to facilitate a project. Our job is to ensure the safety of the groundwater and the surface water within the town's jurisdiction.
Well,
That's
that-
our job.
And
That's
our
what-
subcommittee's job was to act as envoys, and we delivered the concern of the message, but in the same token, to recognize that none of what they're proposing is within jurisdiction. None of it is even close to within jurisdiction. So even with all of that said, they're confining it, they're crushing it, processing it, stockpiling it, and protecting it, applying it, keeping it above groundwater, way outside of jurisdiction, cutting it off with foundation perimeter walls, and then encapsulating it in a slab. Not because they have to, because they just think that that's what we're looking for. And I think a careful balance needs to be struck that, I really do, that this is outside of jurisdiction, way outside of jurisdiction. And I think it's a good use for it, and putting it in an area on a different project where you're collecting runoff from roofs and paved areas and deliberately collecting it to an infiltrating system that's acting as a percolator and deliberately forcing it through is a gross misuse of this material. And this is not that project.
I agree.
And I say that with the feeling that I really believe that we've carried the right message back to from the subcommittee to the commission, and the commission back into the working group. And I think that this is a very high level of protection.
I agree, and the part that I'm saying is, what I'd like to know is depending on how they're gonna use this underneath the building, you say the contractor's gonna use, say it's 6, I don't know if it's gonna be 6 feet deep, I don't know how deep it is. But
I can give you, if it were a strict layer of 100% RCA, the deepest it could be, very conservative, would be about 2.2 feet. That's very conservative,
Yeah,
most
so I
likely
mean,
less.
Meaning 3 feet of gravel being the rest of the fill material.
If it's needed below, yeah.
Structural, yeah.
and then at some point, they're gonna put some type of finished product, like crushed gravel or
Beneath the slab itself.
beneath the slab.
Right.
So I mean, a 2-foot applied is not versus 12 feet in a wet area that was jurisdictional. You're not jurisdictional, you're putting it in at 2 feet maximum, which to me is, I've seen it many times used for subgrade parking lots as the finished product in lieu of recycled asphalt or crushed gravel or the dense graded stone. It would have set him on fire, is the yellow area is, if they were gonna use it for subgrade for the parking, how deep? Foot?
Would have been the same volume, but over a large area, so it would even been narrower and narrower, so we're really,
It would have been a thinner layer.
Right.
really.
Yeah, you would have been just using it for fine grading.
The course of this conversation has led me to think that, can we go back to the foundation cross-section again? Because it's obvious to me, but may not be to the rest of the folks sitting at the table or at home. So when you build a house and you've got a full basement, or you build a commercial building that has an interior high concrete wall, you typically would waterproof the outside of the wall and put a perimeter drain around it to convey the water away. The slab is higher on this building. There's no high wall, so the need for a perimeter drain around the outside isn't going to be a direct conduit for any, if there were ever any movement of groundwater, or there's no way to even introduce it in from a perimeter drain. So there's no need for it on this type of construction. So that's not even there. And that came up in our discussions of the committee, and it's not shown here, and it looks like it may be an omission or maybe, not obvious, but that's a deliberate thing not shown.
If I could state a little differently, Mr. Chairman, on the subcommittee that we were working with the applicant, we went through, I think Mike touched on it pretty well, various levels of, various aspects of logic on how to make this a safe project. Mike talked about we saw the detail of the stockpile, the containment of the rainwater, keeping it clean during construction. We're looking at that detail that Joe just described, and I was thinking the same thing, Joe, that basically this RCA, the the concern is primarily pH, changes in pH. So it raises pH. How does it raise pH? It gets into the groundwater. I think this permanent construction detail specifying a separation of 3 feet from seasonal high groundwater gives you an assurance that it's not going to get into the water, that the water will be managed off the large building, managed on the site, recharged back into the groundwater that will traditionally be 3 feet below the RCA. I think we're safe there. What I think we're missing is Al's point of, okay, we've got the stockpile well protected. We've got basically a pretty safe permanent condition underneath the building. I want to take us back to our very first subcommittee meeting where we focused on construction sequencing. And I'd like the applicant to take us through how are you going to build that? How is it going to be protected during the disturbance of that very well protected stockpile and that permanent condition? How are you going to do it? And because I think that's the question Al's asking, and it's a good one. Because water can run through it during construction, and I think, I don't know, Al, it sounded like that was the piece of logic we haven't touched on yet today. So in the interest of satisfying the questions that we have, could you take us through that and give us some assurance that you will protect us?
So, main issue with another project in town that we were referencing is that the RCA was in the infiltration areas, so it was actually being collected and infiltrated in these areas where it shouldn't have been with the reclaimed concrete. This will be exposed briefly while we place it, mix it, put the clean stone on top, and then build the slab over it. And it's extremely difficult to limit a contractor to having exposed. Yeah.
3 seconds, 3 hours, 3 months. Several months that you, before this thing is got a slab on it, right?
Let me ask it a different way. Okay, the foundation walls, the footer, the foundation wall that goes up, is that roof, is there going to be a roof on before that fill goes in, or is it going to be after the fill goes in?
Most likely it will be prior to the roof.
The fill will go in prior to the roof?
The fill will go in before the roof. It will
Okay.
be uncovered for a period of time.
Okay, so that's, I think, the point of exposure that Al's talking about.
Well, I think you're talking about later down the road.
No, I think you can Jack's right on it. I think Jack's right on it.
I started there, and then I moved later down the road, but the pre-construction, it's gonna be stockpiled, and then during construction, it's gonna be spread out, and there's gonna be time lags, where it's not sealed, where it's not encapsulated, where it's not covered. And that was absolutely one of my questions.
So let me, again, I want to design it from the table here, and we do have probably another subcommittee meeting perhaps, we'll see. But we're only talking that 2.5 feet. So managed, you could come in and you could put your lower layers in and grade them. You could put 25 mil poly. You could put this RCA on top of it, grade and compact it. Another layer of poly before you put your final top in. So you could build this in lifts, and 2.5 feet, you could work those in cells that are manageable at the conclusion of each workday, in the conclusion of each period before you take that next step. You could continue to keep this encapsulated during construction. I don't know, I mean, I'm spending your money, but I think it's doable.
Well, and oftentimes, and I have no idea what the structure of the building looks like, but when you have that footer down the foundation wall, oftentimes structural steel goes up on top of that. And you have a chance to put a roof up to create a sheltered area to backfill and pour that nice slab and keep it real nice. That's one construction sequence that you could consider That way, if you have the structure and, I mean, even corrugated galvanized roof decking, that's gonna shed the water and limit any migration of fines or pH from the RCA that is being put in place and compacted. I'm not trying to design the project, but it's a construction sequence that, it sounds reasonable to me.
Well, the building is huge. They take.
Yeah.
Mac Yancey was what I will say that, you know, the slab definitely goes down first. Sure.
Oh, the slab is.
The way these are typically built, you know, whatever elevation we're starting with, you know, will come up to subgrade. And with this particular building, we've got I think a 6-inch clean stone layer and then a vapor barrier on top of that. And minimum of 6 inches. So, you know, you'll start on one end of the building and then work, you know, put a certain amount of stone for however many days and follow right behind it with the vapor barrier and then follow right behind that with the slab. But just to the point of I mean, it's an 800,000 square foot building that's, you know, 95 feet tall. It takes a long time to get the roof on. So the slab definitely goes down first, and that'll be the ultimate barrier.
This is not a multi-story
big-
building, this is
big
just
project.
a high bay warehouse for the most part.
They'd never be able to get it all prepped.
For the most, I don't want to
For the mo-
complicate it.
for the most
Yeah.
part.
It's not like you're getting
He's talking
a
about a
first
vapor
floor
barrier.
deck
Is
could
that-
shed water. There is no first floor deck. You know, there's
Well,
grade,
they would put
there's
that in.
vast volume of area above it, and then roof.
There actually are multi-levels inside the building. There's
Across the
4
whole
levels
thing?
inside the building, across the whole thing. But they're poured concrete decks, so, you know.
But even
it's-
that happens after the slabs are in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the slab will be down before any of that starts going up.
Okay. So I don't know what the timeline would be. I think if we get an aggressive format on that to develop that, that would be so will you give us an idea how long it will be exposed? I don't think it's gonna be exposed 6 months, but it's not gonna be exposed 2 days.
But my question was about the construction sequencing, and I think Mac was answering some of that in the level of detail that I think we're all looking for, and that is compacted subgrade, RCA, clean fill compacted vapor barrier, and then slab on top of that. Okay, so the vapor barrier, would that be a barrier to moisture, rainwater, whatever, percolating down through the RCA and contaminating the soil?
It will serve as that. That's not the purpose of it.
Yep.
But it will absolutely serve as, it's a true vapor barrier as part of the activity use limitation.
Yeah.
In that portion of the site. So basically, under the building, you've got a sub-slab depressurization system. That barrier is fairly robust. It's
So
not a
that-
piece of poly.
So that's a measure of protection we haven't discussed until now. So I think it's worth noting.
Yeah, and I think it's noted on, it's noted on that detail. Typical clean stone layer with vapor barrier and sub-slab depressurization system. It's just not shown where it is. It sits right
Yeah.
underneath the slab.
So in this cross-section we've been looking at for a while now, the building slab is the work floor area of the interior of the building. We all know that. Nowhere is that below grade. That floor is always above grade. In many instances, it's substantially above grade, your loading docks and whatnot. Okay, so we're meaning that in a loading dock area, that footing that's shown there is even gonna be deeper, because you're gonna have dock height, and then 5 feet of cover for your frost protection for your foundation. So that foundation wall gets driven even deeper. So I would say that the shallowest sense on a slab on grade, you're gonna see that cutoff footing 5 feet below the current grade, or the finished grade of the site. Meaning, you've got that 5-foot cavity from bottom of footing to below slab, thereabouts, of which 2.5 feet is RCA. the top layer of which is well-compacted gravel below your vapor barrier. So if you give yourself a foot, we're gonna lose for that good gravel layer, thereabouts. 2.5 feet out for RCA, thereabouts on average, given the volumes we think we've got out there, still leaves you 2 full feet of, 2.5 feet of, 2 full feet of clean fill, for the most part, beneath that RCA. So at the beginning of bringing this up to grade, you're bringing in clean fill. You're not using the RCA at the deepest depths.
No, not in.
So meaning it's not vulnerable during that period of time when 800,000 square feet of gravel is being broadcast around and graded and compacted. That's clean gravel, that's not RCA yet. It's that, therefore, and it's also that much higher than groundwater. Given the 5-foot cavity we're filling, it seems like that's the case. And then you bring in the 2.5 feet. You could do that on a cell-by-cell basis, and what I mean is, how much area can you bring in 2.5 feet thick, and what percentage of your floor slab area coverage can you bring that in, grade it, compact it, and then put a membrane, call it vapor barrier, call it poly, whatever, a membrane over that and protect that. So during that grading in a week's time, compacted and covered, it's protected again. Move on to the next cell. And can an 800,000 square foot building be divided into 10 cells, 80,000 square feet at a time that can be graded and compacted in a week's time? I've done it when I used to build buildings. Yes, you can do that. So what I'm saying is that you would never have RCA exposed for any more than 1 week at a time, cell by cell. And at the end, put all your compaction on, your vapor barrier on, pour your slab. And I think a sequence like that makes the problem go away. Because we're not talking about leaving 800,000 square feet open months at a time. I think we're talking about leaving it open a week at a time, cell by cell. Think about that. I've graded and compacted. I brought in 3 feet. I brought in 4 feet of fill, graded and compacted 100,000 square foot buildings in a week, half a week.
I'm in agreement with you. I have a good friend that does boards, big boards for a living. And I've asked him.
What are you looking for time here, Mike? Because I think I'd like to do some homework on this off meeting. Not intending to be part of the subcommittee. I want to do some research and do a little homework. I want to do my diligence.
How are you set on planning?
The next planning board hearing is, say again, John? 17th.
How far are you along with them?
January.
Okay, so this time.
There is time.
Okay, all right. All right.
Our thought coming into tonight was, your next hearing's not till January. Is that correct?
January 8th.
We were going to request a continuance tonight for at least one reason. One, even if the commission didn't want to close the hearing till the planning board completes review, right? That's been pretty clear to us. So we're trying to continue to coordinate with that.
Okay.
But even if we did close tonight, your next hearing's outside the 21 days to issue the decisions. We're working to close anyway. So our request now, more specifically, is to your next hearing in January. Commissioners, if I'm hearing you correctly, you've asked us to take another look at what Joe just described, with this kind of.
That's just my opinion. If there's no support for that, I'm not going to make you spin your wheels, but
I have no objection to any ideas, but I want to do, personally, I want to do a little more homework on what I want to follow my continuing education into this stuff. I know where I can go to get some information, so.
Fair enough.
Let me do that, let me do my diligence and.
Is there any more questions?
Yes. Just a couple thoughts. Number one, I'd like to thank the subcommittee for taking the time to get involved in this and roll up your sleeves and deal with the project. And I also appreciate the applicant, the concessions that you've made. I don't know if concessions is the right word, but your ability to work with the subcommittee by keeping everything outside of the 100 for starters. I think that's great. So I think that was a great starting point. I mean, in the end, I wish there was no reclaimed asphalt or concrete on this property. That would be my personal preference, but I understand that personal preferences aren't what we're all here about, so hopefully there'll be able to be some meeting of the minds as to how much and where that reclaimed asphalt and reclaimed concrete goes. But I appreciate everybody's efforts. One question I had, though, is on this imported fill specification, you know, you have that highlighted in a colon that said imported and/or structural fill. So are you, is there a distinction between imported fill and structural fill, or do you mean imported fill being used for structural purposes?
Jim, you want to comment on this?
Just wondering what the language there, yeah.
I think from our perspective, it's broad. So imported can be just common borrow, just fill that's not going underneath the building or underneath the foundation or underneath
Well, I
steel.
think imported means coming from off-site, correct?
This,
That's
Jim's
correct.
going to speak to, this was for that off-site material
Yep.
that we want no confusion, it was not RCA.
But
That's why-
structural fill can also be imported, but that's graded and
Sure, yeah, it really
with
comes down
gradation
to-
analysis and.
It comes down to the gradation and what it's gonna be used for. So structural fill, obviously, you're gonna have elements on top of it that you need it to compact to specific geotechnical requirements.
But it too is coming, could be coming, it's likely coming from outside,
Correct.
outside sources.
This, well, that's what this is in reference to, is
Yeah.
any imported.
This is all imported?
Yes,
Because you
correct.
are going to have stuff on site that you are going to, you know, reclaim and reuse.
Correct.
We've spoken an awful lot about that.
Correct.
So pretty much is all fill structural fill? I mean, is that redundancy, or?
No,
No?
no, I mean, it all depends on the gradation of the fill material that comes in, what's in it, and whether or not you can compact it to a certain percentage.
Okay. Yeah. How big is it? Those are my only thoughts and questions.
So, do you think if we do continue, it would be to the 8th, January 8th meeting? Which, a week before that would be New Year's Day, so the subcommittee would probably not have an opportunity to meet prior to that meeting. And the planning board meets, what was that date?
7, day before.
The
Jan
day
7.
before.
John, is it likely, your expectation?
I don't know what, I don't think the subcommittee could offer anything more than what we've heard tonight, and I think you've taken copious notes. I mean, we know what the issue is. And
Myself, Chairman, I think the subcommittee has done an excellent job, and I don't think there's any more that you can do. There's just a contention about the RCA. I think it's being applied properly. And then the stormwater is going to be reviewed by third party, I'm sure.
Has been signed off.
This has been. So, I mean, I think we're there. So I don't think we have to meet, I don't think the subcommittee has to meet anymore.
The subcommittee, Mr. Chair, has been extremely generous with their time. Scrambling to town hall at 4 o'clock in the afternoon as they're trying to get out of work. So I would agree. It's been a very valuable part of this review process. We've heard the commission tonight. The topic that remains is clearly outside of jurisdictional areas, but continuing with that same good faith effort, we'll take a look at what has been suggested, and we'll report back to the commission. I appreciate Al's going to do his own due diligence too, and I'm hopeful that we'll get him in a spot where he's more comfortable. But, you know, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but the commission should feel comfortable that they've reviewed everything they think they need to review before rendering a decision. We understand that.
Personally, from what I've seen and what I've heard from the subcommittee and you and what I've seen, I'm comfortable with what's been presented. The only issue that is outstanding is the RCA with Mr. Manzi as far as what it's gonna do in the future. Like I said, and Mr. Lynch reiterated, that they've used this many times. Unfortunately, it was misused at the other site, so it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth.
I hear you. It's been unfortunate.
So it's unfortunate because.
It's a little bit more than a bad taste.
Well, I
I
know.
wouldn't want to live there.
I-
I'll tell you
well,
that right now.
I agree, because it wasn't done properly. I think you guys gone the extra mile. So, see what planning
If
does.
there's no more questions, I move that we continue the public hearing until January 8th meeting. I
Okay,
think
you
we've
comfortable
got
with
all
that?
the information on the
Yeah.
table.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank
Thank
you.
you, folks. Have a good night.
You
Happy
too.
holidays. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thank you. Everybody, thank you.
Let's see, where are we here? 242-1776, 805 Forest Street.
This is a notice of intent for the construction of an in-ground pool with a cartridge-style filtration system, associated patio and fencing. Wetland resources are BVW and associated 100-foot buffer zone with a potential vernal pool within the BVW. Verification of the vernal pool wasn't feasible due to the time of year of the delineation. However, the project limits have been kept outside of the 75-foot no-build zone for ephemeral pool per the bylaw. I conducted a site inspection, reviewed wetland delineation. It seems reasonable. I did observe a play structure that was not called out on the plan, but it should be because it may be inside the 50-foot no-build, and that is up towards the terminal end of the masonry wall. Jack Sullivan, the project engineer, is here this evening. If you want to ask any more questions of me or of him.
Just add a little bit to that. I'll be quick. For the record, Jack Sullivan, owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group. The play structure in questions in the back left-hand corner of the site, the owner's going to remove that. That his kids are at the age now they don't use it. So I told him he had to either relocate it outside the 50 or remove it. It will be removed. He's lived in the house for 12 years with his family. Typically, this type of project, if there wasn't the potential of a vernal pool, I would have done an RDA. I mean, the pool patio is over 80 feet away from the wetland line. Norse Environmental did the wetland flagging. They said, in their opinion, it probably is a vernal pool. It's located inside of the wetland boundary, so you can see our limit of work at the closest point is 79 feet. That's to the limit of work. The pool itself is 87, the pool patio is 87 feet away at the closest point. And at the next closest point is 92 feet away. So we're well outside the 75-foot no structure threshold if it was confirmed to be a vernal pool in the spring. But we're not asking the commission to make any determination on the vernal pool. We didn't, but we wanted to get they'd like to construct this pool in the spring, so we wanted to get this permitted over the winter. You can see I show construction entrance. It'll be the existing driveway will be used. We show a proposed stockpile area. It's outside the 100 feet. The pool mechanicals are shown. They're behind the existing shed. It's going to be a gunite pool with a cartridge system, so it's environmentally friendly.
Thank you, Jack.
Yep.
Joe?
You know, a bunch of questions lined up, and Jack just took them away. I guess you can't certify a pool on a neighbor's property.
Right.
Wouldn't be the right thing to do.
Right. And the time of season, but
It's not even your property.
not even our property, right? We probably should have got permission to hang the flags.
I'm all set.
Okay, thanks. Al?
I'm happy, all set.
Okay.
Joe? Have that. Sean?
They're happy, I'm happy.
Thanks, Sean.
It's, you know what we're looking for, Jack. This is complete. It's answering all the questions we have, so thank you.
Yeah, you can put a stockpile and construction.
And identify the mechanicals and
Do you have any-
cartridge filter.
Yep.
No, I mean, I feel like this is straightforward, and, you know, they did belt and suspenders with respecting the 75-foot.
Should we have some markers out there? just around where the 50 is, because it's now 50 no, if we even know if it's a 50 notice
In
area.
fact,
Along the existing tree line, or?
well, actually, that's a good point. Just in the area where, from like flags 5A to 8A,
You're on the neighbor's property.
well, that's,
Keep in mind, there's a
But
property
he's
line
got-
there.
But he's
Yeah.
got the tree line in that area.
and there's
He
a tree,
does. And then he's got the retaining wall. Is it cleared right up to the retaining wall within the 50?
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe
there's a
that's
tree line
good.
on the property, or
Tree line's on the property.
on the property, so just some markers,
Yeah, just like the 50.
some,
We could put some markers on the trees in
Yeah.
that area.
just to minimize or make sure there's no activity there.
Yep, if that's a condition, we will do that, and you can condition that the place set be removed.
Do we want the, up to the 50 revegetated? That masonry wall, is that what, is it just a freestanding stone wall?
Yeah.
It's not a retaining wall, it's
not
just a
retaining.
freestanding,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's,
It's a pretty good buffer
it's a
within
masonry
itself,
wall.
right?
It's,
Yeah, it
it's,
is amazing.
is it about 2 feet high, the wall to the
The
back?
other places up there,
Yeah,
but if they got the wall there,
About 2 feet high.
yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
It's a great barrier. It's not right at the 50, it's still a good barrier.
It's okay, it's good,
Yep.
yep, it's good.
Does it serve any purpose at all?
Doesn't
Not
appear
really,
to.
it's just kind of,
Old farm remnant?
I show it, I don't know what its purpose was.
It's-
It's not retaining any earth, I don't know.
That's, it's,
Decoration.
whatever it is, it's good.
Yeah, it's a barrier.
It's a barrier.
Right, motion?
I move that we close an issue.
are you, I didn't draft a decision.
Continue
I move that we
administratively.
continue.
Administratively.
What are we on, the 21 days, is that what this is?
Yeah.
Next meeting's the 8th.
So,
That's,
I can give relief on the 21 days if you have if your next meeting, if you.
what would be
issue and
best
sign.
is let us continue it to the next meeting?
Yep,
And we can close it and issue that night?
okay. And
It's gonna be a push, it's gonna be the same no matter what you do.
if I
Check,
don't,
I mean, not that's gonna change the motion tonight, but check into that, because can an applicant give relief on the statute that obligates us to reach a decision? I'm not sure they can give us that relief.
I don't know, I feel like it's been done, but
Yeah,
There's no need,
traditionally, we've always,
there's no need to though.
Right.
We can continue it and it's the
Same result.
same result, there's no need to do
yeah,
that.
if we continue, if I don't have to be at the next meeting and you
Yeah.
don't have any issues, it can be, and
That's-
we're fine, we're not looking to start construction until the spring anyways.
I move that we continue to January 8th.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you very much, thank you.
Next one's 242-1774, 633 Turnpike, request to continue to February.
February 5th, they have some planning board application approval to go through, so.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Next one is 242-1777, 500 Whitman.
So this notice of intent involves construction of a rear building addition, wood frame deck, and paver walkway and patio expansion with some landscaping beds. The work will take place in the outer riverfront area, not the first 100-foot, but the second 100-foot of the riverfront of an unnamed perennial stream that's located to the west, and outside the 100-foot buffer zone to BVW that's located to the north and east. The project received ZBA variance approval for expansion of the building. I think it was last night, or, yeah, a couple nights ago. The planning board has held one public hearing and has conducted a third-party peer review, which did include stormwater. There were some, Horsley Whitland did provide recommendations to the applicant with regard to stormwater, including test pits in the patio area that's going to be sort of a main infiltration area. They've been added to the plan, and test pit results have been added to the plan. And then basically moving forward, monitoring the patio to ensure that it drains properly, as it is a stormwater feature. So, and project proponent is here this evening with his consultant, so if you have any more questions for me or them.
Joe, any questions?
Not yet.
Not at this time, I do not.
Jack?
Just basic stuff. Is the orange section the building addition and the green, the patio?
Correct.
Well,
It-
there's,
The herringbone is the patio, the green is pathway.
the
right?
green is path, walkway, and patio extension. The orange encapsulates both building and deck.
Building and deck. And then the hexagonal, the gray and white area,
Yeah.
is that the,
Existing patio.
that's existing patio?
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
Right, that's what I thought. Good. Okay, I have no other questions at this time. Thanks.
Sean?
What's the white part of the paper for?
TBD.
Oh, the out of bounds is where my balls live.
So,
Done debating now?
Not now. They don't let me golf anymore.
so the planning board has yet to close on it.
Clear with me, Joe.
And are you on for this December 17th?
Correct.
So, I know that planning staff has drafted a decision for that meeting, so they could potentially close on the 17th, and then the commission would know that it's gone through planning board. I know that, I think the chair mentioned that, you know, you usually don't like to close before planning board closes.
Correct.
We try not to if it's possible.
Right. I wasn't able to draft a decision.
Just because usually when we do it, they end up having to come back for modification or an amendment, that the
Right.
planning board will change something that may impact it.
Right,
It's possible.
right. So,
So we just need to
I mean,
continue.
I will absolutely have a drafted decision for the January 8th meeting.
Like we did the application before.
Hmm?
You had you'll have the decision already from Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, I will have that on the 8th as
All
well.
that, If there's no
Like
questions.
that, we could
do
hit
it
them
with this
the same
project
way.
also.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, if you guys don't need any new information or
questions?
supplemental
So the risk
information.
is if something comes up with the planning board.
With the planning board,
They have a holding spot to come back at that meeting if they
right.
wait.
Right.
Yeah,
But
this,
absent
this
that-
project, we're hoping to get started in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Sure, it won't be done before opening here.
So I need a motion to continue till
January 8th, so moved.
Second.
January. Okay, all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
That's unanimous.
All right.
All
Okay?
set.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you January 8th. Thank you.
All right.
Happy holidays.
Is an enforcement order, 410 Summer Street.
All right, 410 Summer Street. Commission issued an amended enforcement order at its last meeting requiring that erosion controls be installed, that the exposed sidecast stockpiled soil be covered with erosion controls or equivalent to prevent erosion, retain the services of a wetland consultant to formally delineate the wetlands and prepare and submit notice of intent to properly permit the work, and then come to this meeting to give us an update. The homeowner emailed us informing us that he has installed erosion controls. I had our field inspector, Ben, go out to take a look. And I have pictures. Okay. So, not the entirety of the side cast soils are covered when he was there. So, I'm not sure if the commission wants more than that. On another note, the homeowner has engaged with Andover Consultants to prepare a plan.
Is there a wetland scientist involved?
I don't know, I'm gonna ask you that.
Ricci?
sorry.
David Gricci.
Okay.
Okay.
That was a gentleman from Andover Consultants.
He's affiliated with Andover?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
very
okay.
good, very
Great.
good.
I sent you a copy of the plan. His name is on the plan.
Oh, okay.
He's the one who signed it, and he's the owner of the business too. The inspector took a photo of the plan as well.
Okay. All right, great. Okay.
David Gricci?
Yes.
Dennis?
Dennis.
Dennis
Yeah.
Gricci?
You're correct.
Sorry,
Yeah,
close
and-
enough, it's okay.
But that's not what Al asked. So David he's the engineer.
Mhm.
But you asked.
Oh, I asked
Wetland
about a wetland
scientist.
scientist. We requested that you retain the services of a wetland scientist or a wetland consultant to formally delineate the wetland and prepare and submit the notice of intent.
Isn't that what this guy's gonna do for me?
They may have someone on staff, but I don't know that.
Is he a wetland guy or is he the surveyor?
I don't know. I've never met him, so I've never dealt with North Andover Consultants, so.
Okay, so what did,
Can I look at this?
you know what, the letter that you have, the November 26th letter that you have from us,
Yep.
that outlines what we want you to do, if you just make sure that Andover Consultants sees that.
Yeah.
Yeah, item 3 in their quote says, "Field survey location of wetland flag set by your wetland biologist."
So they're not providing a wetland consultant.
That, I mean, it seems, and then not included in the fee quoted are the costs for outside consultants, biologists, wildlife scientists.
So you're still missing an expert, you're missing one expert. There needs to be somebody that is qualified to determine the wetland line.
All right, I'll have this guy get on that.
Because I'm noticing that now on the end of a consultant's
Yeah,
proposal to you.
Yeah, you should know what he's providing you.
They
with
want you to get
services.
your biologist, your wetland person.
Okay.
Yeah. That's real important because that line is everything for you.
Yeah,
And that, once you establish that line, it's good for like 3 years.
Okay.
So,
yeah. And I can give you a list of wetland people. I mean, Dennis, I'm sure knows too.
we can definitely give you a list of names of people that come before us.
Okay.
And you can pick them.
And you can, I mean, the other thing you can do is I can give you the list and you can shop around. You know, they may come within, a couple $100 of each other, but usually like the straight delineation is kind of the cheaper part of things. So you might want to shop around.
Yeah, let's give them the.
Okay, yeah.
Crazy thing is,
Let's give them some
Andover
people's-
Consultants does enough of work before us.
That they should know.
They work with people, they can make a recommendation.
Yeah, okay.
You know, people that
That's
they're
fine.
comfortable
Get
working
some,
with.
Yeah, yeah.
get some prices.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's working in good faith. How much time do you need to get things rolling so you have to come back every 2 weeks?
I can get on this tomorrow, so
Yeah.
I do not know. I don't know
Why
how
don't
it's
we,
gonna
Yeah, and
why don't we go to the second meeting in January? Instead of bringing them back the 8th,
oh, yeah, I think that's
Let's
fair.
give- let's
Yeah,
give
yeah,
them till
yeah.
the second
Continue,
meeting.
Oh,
we
yeah.
may not even need them at that one too, depending what the progress they're making.
But let's give him some time to do some,
Right.
put this thing together, Because he's got it all stabilized. Let's just let him,
Okay.
give him a chance to.
22nd, the second meeting?
Yeah, the second meeting in January, I think it's the 22nd.
I move we continue to January 22nd.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
So you got till the 22nd to get things together and just send progress reports to Amy and
Yeah, just keep me posted.
We'll do.
by
We'll help you
email.
get it done.
All right, thanks for coming. I know it was a long wait.
So I also just noticed here that it says not included in the quote, as you said, the cost of outside consultants, which will be billed at 20%. So it sounds like Andover is going to hire out
Put 20% in your pocket.
So,
and then put 20% in their pocket.
so it might be,
So-
it might be better for this gentleman to
Go outside. the loop,
hire his
get
own
the
guy
list.
and,
Find your own.
yeah, you can.
You know what I'm
say-
referring to on this?
Oh,
I saw that comment, yes.
Yeah, that comment, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
As
You might
long
wanna
as we
shop.
accept the line, and you can get it cheaper, that's fine.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
20% commission.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, if you have a name of a person that you're dealing with, you wanna just
Doesn't
check with
motivate,
Amy to make sure
doesn't
that they're
motivate Andover to
approved.
find the cheapest one either.
The best way to go,
We should
just
get
make the
that,
call.
right? We go- and we have to
Okay,
pick
thank
proposal, we
you.
get 20%.
So 20% of our salary?
Yeah.
That's kind of,
So,
they're kind of making money on that, huh?
6:30, Turnpike
so that's the one we were gonna talk about.
Yeah.
We were gonna
Oh.
talk about
Fines.
issuing, well, we have to issue an enforcement order.
Well, where we are with that place, if you recall, is they got a violation notice, and then he was here. And we all saw his level of cooperation. So, and he's very cognizant of the law, apparently. So, we should, in my humble opinion, we should.
apparent to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to take the high road here, we're on the air. So, my humble opinion, we should draft an enforcement order right away.
What was the effect, when did you spot this?
Hold on. Wait a minute. I got the EO here. October 28th. On the 25th.
October 25th, 2019.
Yep.
So you confronted them, did they, you gave a
So-
verbal cease and desist, and did he stop?
The-
They kept working.
Well, I have reason to believe that it was a Friday afternoon, I was leaving work, they were working, I turned around, I shut the excavator guy down, and I waited for him to walk it over to the other side of the site. And he said, okay. I said, okay. I talked to a principal of the project on the phone at that time, and I said, can't do any more work. And I made it a point to say that, you know, our chairman travels down this road all the time. I'm gonna tell him what just transpired here today, so I'm trusting that you're not gonna continue work. Came into work on Monday. Things were exactly the way I left it on Friday. I wrote the violation letter. He came in actually as I literally was finishing the letter, so I handed him the letter, Mr. Gata, and you know, told him that you really need to file, you know, you can't do any more work, please file an RDA. I thought would have been appropriate, but
So Gata is the
Is the
contractor. Contractor. So
Right.
the
yes,
violator is him, but the violation goes to the landowner.
right.
It should go to the both. Landowner and then CC to the contractor. Do we have a cease and desist order issued for the site?
My letter, yes.
Just a letter, yeah.
So let's reaffirm the cease and desist order in the
In the
enforcement order.
okay.
That the site is to remain stable, no activity
In the buffer.
in the buffer, yeah, which the whole site's in the buffer.
Not all of it.
So,
Not
Right.
all of it. That's why they were able to get through all these reviews
Okay,
without
yeah.
getting before us.
well, they were
That's-
He's using the building.
they were cute. They used the building,
Yeah.
and they said, we want to work inside the building, and then they got the permit, and then, you know, took
Right.
artistic license. Okay, so
Right.
word it accordingly, so that they understand
Okay.
that where the cease and desist.
All right.
And,
There's no such thing as a carte blanche
well,
permit,
No, I know.
I don't think.
some
So,
people confuse kindness for weakness, so we're here to, we just have to tighten it up a little
Pick
bit.
the wrong person.
Well,
Persons.
All right, so what would you like to see happen? We have a cease and desist. Do we not want them to file? They did not, there was no permitting done for the work outside, right? They've done no permitting?
right,
So they've got to file a notice of intent for what they want to do.
okay.
So, I'm trying to map a
We got a
framework here.
violation.
We have a violation that was discovered, a letter issued at a certain date.
Yep, yep.
This guy crossed the line tonight. That makes me say fines begin tonight. I think going back retro is just a pain in the neck.
Okay,
We
and
have to
because
defend
I
it.
can't
I think we go
pin-
tonight.
Okay.
Tonight,
Right.
the fines move forward.
Yes,
But I
that-
think fines are warranted moving forward.
Yeah, great idea. Start the fines as of tonight. Great
But does
idea.
he-
$100 a day. $100 a day.
$50
start.
a day, correct.
$100 a day till he
Files a notice of intent with us.
Well, okay,
The site's stable, right?
Is he-
Yeah, I
we-
mean, no,
we
there's-
give him a violation notice on what he's trying to do, or what's there now?
Actually, let's do this again, because if he does litigate, and he seems like he's a hothead, he might have a friend who knows how to do this stuff and make life miserable.
I doubt it very much.
$100 a day, held in abeyance, so long as he files a notice of intent within 6 weeks. If he doesn't, it tolls the full time. It continues thereafter. So it gives him some motivation to avoid the fines, do what we really want, which is to get the NOI before us, so we can get a project permitted and do the work. If he continues to work, if he violates the cease and desist, that's a separate violation unto itself, but we don't need to talk about that. So I think, does that make sense? We wanna motivate him to get before us.
I wanna motivate him, but I wanna keep it simple.
Yeah, but you have two separate issues.
Yeah.
You got an issue that he wants to put the plantings on that east side.
Well, he's got a cease and desist, he's putting nothing,
All right.
nothing's
but
going
then-
anywhere.
But then he has an existing parking lot
Yeah.
that we don't know when he put it in.
So that's why we want the NOI.
That's the violation.
We want the NOI.
Oh, for the whole site.
Everything, the whole site. We want the NOI for all the work, all the proposed work that has been done and that wants to be done.
I don't wanna talk
We
about the
want-
merits of what he's going to do, what your beautification or violation, I don't wanna get, we don't know what he's doing, he doesn't have a permit.
Yeah.
But this
Or what
was a
he's- or what he's
previously
done.
improved site. He can come in as a as a redevelopment, because it is, to the greatest extent practical, we can work with them, but we can't let him violate our bylaw. You know, if there was pavement there, we can let the pavement continue to be,
As
we
in improve
can't get any closer, and you can't make other improvements,
They
which
didn't,
is,
they
Suppose it'll be in
didn't
the
propose
ordinance.
any change to
He's gotta propose.
impervious surface, like, nothing, no changes to the parking.
Right, no.
No
He has an
asphalt.
open RDA right now that he requested to continue.
But that has nothing to do with the outside area.
Oh,
It's only, the open idea is for the inside of the building.
There was an
No, no, no,
RDA.
it was in-
That's what he was.
For the fence and the shrubs.
Right. He was
He
in
has
front of
an
us
open
today
RDA.
on an RDA.
Yeah,
On
that
an
was,
R-
that we just opened.
That
up.
was
That
an
all the- Yeah,
RDA.
that's why he's here. He was here earlier today on an
Yeah.
RDA.
That's why he was here earlier in the,
I was confused. I thought he was working with.
I thought we were in a
without
violation.
permit.
Honestly, God, I missed that too, because I would have triggered it, a positive
But I thought-
determination
I
of
thought he
fine.
was working with.
That was the answer.
but he requested to continue.
Yeah, but
Till
hold on.
he speaks with his
Hold
lawyer.
on. I wanna go back to Amy's notes.
Well, that's what he said, because right? He requested to continue and we voted to continue.
Right.
Go back to the notes, guys.
All right.
What was before us tonight is an after-the-fact
Oh,
application
it's
for work.
complicated.
That's the fence in the back.
So he doesn't have to file, he doesn't have to file a notice of intent. He's already filed an after-the-fact application.
Yeah.
So that's all-
RDA.
After the fact RDA.
Yeah, so that.
Which we can say a positive.
So we can either,
Or-
we can either make a positive finding, or we can just attach the conditions that we want to this, whatever everybody thinks.
He's still got the cease and desist, right?
Yeah.
The cease and desist is gonna be automatic, but what do we, that's what we're trying to get at. What do we want him to do after the cease and desist? We gotta give him the instructions on the notice of, on the enforcement order. What do we want him to do? I had forgotten that we had this RDA in front of us.
Well,
The question I have
We
is,
told him,
Let's go back to the IDA for a second.
Yes.
because This guy got an enforcement order, there's clearly some dialogue,
he hasn't got any enforcement order yet.
but he's got a violation
He's got
notice,
a violation.
violation notice.
right.
You got a violation notice, there's been some dialogue. He submitted, by some guidance, or maybe misguidance, he submitted an RDA. We accepted it, knowing that this work is not permissible under an RDA. I guess you're allowed to accept a poisoned application, you did.
Well, I mean.
So that's what's before us, is a
I'll-
poisoned application.
I'll shoulder that because I told him RDA. Because I thought shrubs,
Well, my-
I mean, that's really what was happening in the no disturb
I
zone,
told Amy-
planting of shrubs.
I told Amy, I could be wrong, but I thought that if there is a waiver request, which there would have to be here, that you can't do an RDA.
On a undeveloped piece of property, but this is redevelopment. If you could argue that plantings are an enhancement, it's an improvement to the greatest extent practicable, you meet the stormwater standards. This very well might be an RDA.
Even with an existing violation of the parking lot in the 25.
How do we know it's an existing violation? We don't know that. I mean, we
She
suspect
did
that.
the aerials, it was before, that there was no parking lot there from 95, in 95.
No,
to
it says,
2001.
it says the
Huh?
the aerial photos appear to have occurred between 95 and 01. There are no files on record with the commission for any previous activity on the site.
So that's a clear violation.
So that, what do we want him to do with the enforcement order? Do we want to issue a
24
positive
years ago.
finding?
24 years ago, some window of time when we think that there may not have been a parking lot there. The building's there, From what I remember, when my accountant used to be there, and I used to have him do my taxes, I parked on pavement. That was a long time
Yeah,
ago.
but was it as big as it is now?
That I can't tell you.
Joe, don't admit anything, take the fifth. You parked somewhere, you don't remember where it was.
Yeah, we never been to this building.
He actually walked.
Amy, I guess we're looking for some
Recuse
guidance. here.
yourself, Joe.
It was so far back, it wasn't even on the commission. It wasn't even on,
Like I said, I don't know what, it's two separate issues. There's an RDA there, that's
Right.
it's a violation.
Which we
She
can-
wants to put plants in the wetlands. And the fence is
my whole
in the-
point of motivating him by the fines and towing them until he's already filed. I think he's met that obligation.
Yeah, but I don't think he
Right, but
knows
it's got
that.
nothing to do with the pavement. Right, I mean, nothing he's
Right.
doing here has got to do with that change in pavement from 90 whatever to today.
That's the sticking point. How do we get that addressed?
NOI, right?
I don't think we can. I don't think we can do anything about it.
I don't think we can either. I
don't
think it's
think we
open
can
and,
do
it's
anything
open
about
and, what's the phrase, open and notorious,
There's-
open and obvious?
I mean,
I mean, it's right on 114.
kind
We've
there's
driven
there's
past it
no,
a
there's
thousand
not an
times.
unlimited amount of time for us to
You're
take
going by-
action on
You go
something.
by 50, you're not
This
gonna
thi-
notice
this thing,
it.
this thing is
Oh,
too old.
bobblehead all the time.
Well,
It's just too old, it's 25 years.
Right.
We can't do anything.
But it might not be 25 years. It might be 10 years.
What you know and what you can prove have to come together, or we can't do anything.
Right, but I think he has to prove his,
I
No?
don't think
He
so.
doesn't have to do
I
a
don't
damn
think
thing.
so.
All he has to do is sit there.
I don't think he can do that.
Okay, but again,
Not him, the applicant. The applicant can simply say, I want to take the existing condition, which is there, and I want to make these improvements on my plan.
yeah,
And the discussion will be, well, when was that pavement there? Well, I've owned the building 15 years, and it's always been there. Do we go after another person who did a violation perhaps sometime between 95 and 01?
we gotta keep this simple.
I don't think we do that.
We gotta keep
I
this.
think we lose.
Within
Well-
reason, what is it we want to accomplish? Let's list it in the enforcement order, and then bring them back in at the next meeting. Because if we get this thing all convoluted, it's gonna take hours, and we're gonna end up with the same result. You know,
so what do you want to enforce?
Well,
So,
that's why.
what's
I keep
before us,
asking.
we have, and I apologize, I totally missed this was an RDA. So we do have an RDA before us. He requested a continuance by whatever means he stormed out with that request in place.
And he's
We
still
granted it.
He's still under the cease and desist.
Right, so,
From the October
so
28th.
my whole position of getting him to file, he's already filed, it's before us. We need to act on that at the next meeting. We either issue a positive or a negative determination. We think it's,
Yes.
pretty sure it's a positive.
Correct.
And at that point, he moves forward.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
I think it's all we do.
I think so, the enforcement order's gotta be simple. The enforcement order has to, A, say cease and desist, and B, fines will accrue in the amount of,
You said
$100
$100 a day.
but when? When?
As of tonight,
Starting today.
as of tonight.
Yeah.
For violation of the cease and desist order.
And Joe said to keep,
Right.
have
yeah, I
it
mean,
in
that's,
abatement
I think
until,
that's the crux of the issue,
Say that.
because
hold it on
he went
abatement.
ahead,
Well,
I
I'm gonna
can't,
hold off on
can't
that
tell you
because
when he
he
put the
does
fence in
have a
after I
permit
issued
for
my
us.
letter,
Well, he
but it
admitted
was there,
today, he
all of
said
a sudden it was there.
he said the posts were rotting and the fence was rotting. He took out the old one, put the new one in, used the same holes. That's what, he said that tonight on the
He
record.
probably did.
That's fine, that side is approvable. It's the part where the parking lot is in the 25, and he wants to put a row of bushes right adjacent to the wetlands. Do we-
You have to look at the parking lot as a previous
I
disturbance.
know, but it's on the other side of the parking
Do you
lot.
have those pictures of?
He wants
Yeah.
to put a row of arborvitae's?
Yep.
Yep,
That's an enhancement.
Black arborvitae.
That could be covered under an
Excuse me?
RDA. That's an enhancement. The arborvitae's are not a problem.
In the no disturb?
It's a plant.
I know.
I think it comes down to,
It's-
What part of no
if the,
disturb?
if the current owner is not responsible for that
That looks
parking
fine.
lot. That's an
fine.
old parking lot.
No, that's
Look-
the new
It's
one.
absolutely an old parking
this is the new fence and the arborvitae's that he
Look
planted
at that
at the
parking
back
lot,
of the
Louis.
property.
Oh, maybe it
This
could've been-
terminal end
could've
is
been
45
done by
feet from
Joe
the
Gypsy.
Maybe.
I
I don't wanna be here all night, guys. Can we?
I don't either.
Can we just wrap this thing?
And this is the wetland.
I think we already know.
Yep, so what are we enforcing him from?
That's what I'm saying.
Fines? From the date he put in the fence?
No, today,
I don't know
we're
when
good
that
even to today, we're being nice.
Enforcement order dated today with.
Fines at $100 a day.
That specify fines for violating the cease and desist, which was issued on your reference letter, October 28th. What else can we do?
So, he.
But he's not actively violating.
That
the
was a
cease
single,
and
that was a
desist.
single
he-
occurrence.
he was.
What he was. Whacked him with a
was
$100 fine for
He's been
that.
working without a permit.
Yep.
Okay, he's been working without a permit, so he's filed an after-the-fact application for a permit. So he's gotta complete that, he's gotta cease and desist until he completes this activity.
Right.
That's what he has to do. Let's just,
So no fines, no
I mean, I
enforcement.
think I think we're,
No, I'm not disagreeing with you.
we're chasing.
I think I'm seeing it.
Yeah, you know what I
same
mean?
way
This,
you are.
Right.
this thing, just follow the notes. She's got it laid out chronologically. You can see what really we have to do. This is just, we have to make them wrap it up, that's all.
All right, so
So no enforcement.
no enforcement.
No enforcement order?
The enforcement
Well, what
order should
if
just restate the cease and desist
Okay,
and
all
to appear here
At the January.
January 8th meeting.
All right,
I mean,
so.
You don't want to say anything about fines for violation of cease and desist?
You know,
I think you should.
I think you should
Because
too.
just based on this guy's.
I'll defer to you guys on that. I will
Because,
absolutely- I will
because
absolutely
Amy
defer.
said that after the cease and desist, he kept working.
When was
Well,
the
I
first-
think that,
So when was the first cease and desist issued?
October 28th.
October 25th, or 28th.
And when did he do the work between?
She doesn't know.
I don't know when he put the fence in,
But it was was it after
but
the
it was
28th?
after I issued that
So
letter.
then there it is.
So start on that date then, $100 a day,
$100.
up to tonight. He's here, he came in.
All right, so
$100 a day from the date you discovered up to,
28th to now,
say it again?
The date you discovered.
The date you discovered
Which
that,
is
October 25th.
really,
October, your letter says October 25th, so that's.
yes, when he was first working for the shrubs
When was that?
on the 25th, Friday the 25th.
So that's the date you started?
That was the date that he was putting the shrubs in.
Okay.
Right, fence was
The
after.
fence wasn't put in at that time.
Okay, so,
Then he put the fence
so
in.
you're starting
After the
$100 a
season.
day on the 25th up till tonight's meeting.
Okay,
For violating the cease and desist
Viol-
order.
And working without a permit.
okay,
But the cease and desist was on the 28th, correct?
right,
Yeah,
yes.
So the 25th is not the right date.
It's the
This is
28th.
the 28th.
But, okay, okay, I'll agree.
28.
And again, we have documented that he had activities without a permit, which is why he filed an after-the-fact application. So, all right, so just go with that and get him in. This is not a thing, we don't want this to take on a life of its own.
No, I get it.
It's just not that,
I know.
Doesn't have to, and it seems like it could for this
it could.
mindset. Yeah.
And we shouldn't let it.
Don't feed it.
It's too, come on.
All right, so you want to make a motion to issue that EO?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, and that's unanimous.
What's this?
We have
Do we have a decision?
no, not getting down here.
Yeah,
Oh, we have an extension request.
yeah, we didn't, I
12
thought
Oscar
we weren't
Street.
gonna have
That
it.
was continued as well.
This is trustees
That's
of reservations, we
continued,
doing this? We
If you
closed
can.
it, right?
Yep,
So we should do it.
yep.
Oh, let's finish the extension request.
What extension request, I'm sorry?
It
Yeah.
says,
They requested
it
to
says request to
continue.
continue to 1/8,
Who?
What?
the last entry.
12.
Yeah, the last one is a request to continue, that's not on for tonight.
See if the end moves?
Right,
Wait,
so, I don't know. So that's, we gotta clear.
Oh, yeah, move to continue.
Oh, okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay. Now it's decision time, and you have trustees.
Trustee.
Can you start that, I'll be right back.
I'm not- it doesn't matter to me. I just-
Yes. No. Enforcement. You want one?
I don't know if there's one in my packet.
quick one.
So one question I had is, I saw the applicant had a draft. Is that something we ordinarily do, give the applicant a draft of our order of conditions before we vote on it?
I've seen commissions accept drafts from the applicant. If what they want, it's permitted, sure.
I mean,
Sometimes we.
I told her it's for your review only.
Right, no, I know, I don't
And
remember
was it the whole
seeing that.
draft, or was it just a condition or two?
It was the whole draft.
It was the whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it has been done before.
I mean, if you don't like it, if you don't want me to do it, I won't do it.
I think we have done it before.
Doesn't matter to me, I just hadn't noticed that before, so, you know, where the applicants have it.
Yeah,
So it's not a criticism, just something that I hadn't seen.
yeah. So, I'm gonna change the revision date of the plans to reflect the new date.
So number 50 will include the street opening, correct? That would be a state permit?
Yep,
Okay.
I'll write that in.
So they're renovating a building, or they're putting a new building? Renovating a
They're
building.
doing a parking lot.
They're doing a
Right.
new building, which is
Oh,
out,
they're doing a
out
building too?
of jurisdiction.
Oh, it's out of jurisdiction?
Yep,
Okay, so
yep.
5,000, all right.
It'll be like a little greeting center.
Yep. So $5,000 bond for the parking lot.
I don't know. That's just,
Joe, look at number
That's a
53.
guess.
Is that the state culvert?
That what?
53.
53.
It's there, right there.
That's 54.
54, I'm sorry. Yeah, culvert work, I'm sorry, 54.
Joe, what do you think about the bond of 5,000 for the parking lot and stormwater management system?
I think it's fine.
That's fine?
Flat area.
Yeah.
That would be them, it would be the state, right? Is that culvert, is that the pipe on the 125 you're talking about, on number 54? Number 54, is that the one culvert?
It's calling for, that condition is calling for the
Culvert.
activity. It just says further investigated for the presence of BVW and other wetland resources flagged in the field accordingly.
right. So I refer to 53, right. So,
So we have those three conditions tying together, but what are we really trying to say? One is, we're not trying to obligate the trustees, other than to convince Mass DOT to do what they're supposed to do. DOT, as an existing drainage facility, has a right to maintain it, to inspect and maintain it.
okay,
However, if it's a failure, it needs a replacement, they have to file for that. Those are the really pecking orders, right? So, what would we, I think what you're trying to do here is maybe, is to not make it gonna be construed that we're giving carte blanche approval to DOT. If they need to replace the culvert, just go in and do it.
right.
That's what we're trying to stop short of,
Right.
right?
DOT's exempted it?
Yeah, we've had the battle all the time. It's, with all my wealth of knowledge of what that I gained in the past year and a half of work with them.
But you know that at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, they're gonna just play it, so we can condition it. Hope for the best. I think that's exactly what it has to say, though. I agree with the way it's written. You don't like it?
No, I do, I wanted to understand why those second two conditions were separated, and I think it's because we expect that to find a deficiency in the culvert.
Yeah, we just don't know.
It's probably collapsed,
But what we're telling them is if they find out that they have to do it, they gotta come back and permit it, that's all.
because that culvert's probably older than me and you.
So, it's a wait and see, Lou. It's a wait and see, that's what we're saying.
I've looked, going by, I've looked down, and I don't like what I see. Just looking at the end. We don't want to talk about the middle. There's trees there on the front of it like this.
Yeah, but this is clear. If they wanna do it, they gotta come in, right?
They're not gonna do shit. They're not gonna do anything.
But I think this gives them
Hey, maybe
So I know,
trustees have
I know
some
it's
clout.
definitely gonna be in the buffer, but what, the mouth of it wasn't really investigated for wetlands. I wanna make sure they're not in a BBW mucking around. That's all.
That's what I was
That's
driving at when I
all.
was trying to break these
Right,
down.
that-
Because I think what we are saying, that we acknowledge after you inspect, you're gonna find there's a deficiency of some
Yeah.
sort.
Yeah,
So long as that's only cleaning and maintenance, you're entitled to do that.
Yeah.
You just simply need to tell us that you're going to do it and when.
But if they have to, if they have to replace it, obviously, they have to come in and amend.
So I think
The
that's,
order.
that's what 55 should continue to
so,
say,
okay,
is anything beyond
anything, okay,
cleaning and maintenance.
yep,
Will require.
May require is likely to require further permitting activity by DOT.
all right.
The NACC must be notified. NACC must be notified. And,
Okay.
and then the rest as drafted.
All right,
That's all. That's all you can do.
yep.
Now, these are great words in an order of condition issued to the trustees. Why isn't our DPW picking up the phone and calling the district highway engineer and say, hey, I need someone to come down and look at this culvert? Because that's what I do all the time. And they come out and they answer my phone calls and they come out and do stuff.
Do they?
They do. Why don't the town just pick up the damn phone and call DOT?
No. We could ask.
That water is real, I've seen it.
Oh, there's denying it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the butters, God love them, they were trying to use this project as a platform to bring it to our attention, but they didn't need to, but these guys aren't causing any problem, and they're not making it worse either.
I move that we
Adopt as
adopt the order of conditions as drafted
amended.
and amended.
Second.
Wait, we have no chairman.
Yeah, we have no chairman.
But we have a quorum.
No, we'll wait.
You're the vice chair.
Right,
No,
okay.
no, we're gonna wait till he comes back in the room.
That's the smart play.
Yeah.
Get those signature sheets ready.
You got stuff for us to sign, ma'am?
Yes.
God, no matter how hard you try, right?
I know it, we,
All right, this
10:30?
is,
You bet, they locked the door.
Who looks at
this
this?
is you catching
Dan
up
Weiss,
on
up the hill?
Chickering. on the
I'm sorry,
trustees.
this is me doing what now?
This is you catching up on
Well,
the
people in-
meeting that you missed.
Where am I signing? Right here, on this line? This line here?
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, I see.
Catch up, it's catch up, it's
It is.
all about playing catch up.
What are we doing? Okay, thank you.
Okay, just,
I'll get my stuff together.
Where do I sign it?
Small project permits, I swear.
so what's today, sign here?
Lou, you have, you have a motion and a second to adopt
As
this
drafted.
as
As amended.
drafted and amended.
Drafted and amended.
All you have to do is call the vote.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
We're signing, we're going that way.
Did I just,
Motion to
what was the
adjourn.
second sheet?
I don't know.
So moved.
Did I send it? A
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is, and why do they sign it?
I don't know. Because Amy put it, you put an appeals
Jamie,
sheet in front of us.
Jamie,
Did you want
they
that
sign
signed?
I don't think that's what I don't know what I'm talking about, but I signed something I don't think I should have.